the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia, where the two rivers were the highways of empires, emerged as a theater of innovation and conquest. Here, amidst the fertile plains of the Tigris and Euphrates, humanity witnessed the birth of urban centers like Uruk and Eridu, beacons of cultural and technological prowess. These cities, with their grandeur and magnificence, thrived on ingenuity, giving rise to writing, monumental architecture, and law systems. But Mesopotamia was not merely a land of progress. It was a stage for epic struggles, where gods were revered and monarchs fought to carve their legacies into the earth itself. From the rise of the Sumerians, whose ingenuity turned marshlands into arable farmland, to the grandeur of Akkadian kings like Sargon I, the region flourished under the vision of legendary rulers. Sargon forged the first empire, connecting distant realms and cultures under his dominion. But his successors faced relentless challenges, revolts, invasions, and the insatiable ambition of rival kingdoms. The narrative ebbed and flowed, with empires like Babylon and Assyria emerging, reaching staggering heights and falling to dust, only to be replaced by new powers that echoed their former glory. This resilience in the face of adversity is a testament to the enduring spirit of Mesopotamia. The Assyrians brought war to an art form, blending military precision with ruthless tactics that sent shockwaves through the ancient world, under kings like Ashurbanipal, who also built one of history's first great libraries. Their influence stretched far and wide. With its hanging gardens and monumental gates, Babylon showcased a different kind of splendor. The laws of Hammurabi, etched into stone, embodied the order rulers sought to impose upon their often chaotic world, a legacy of governance that continues to resonate today, shaping the very fabric of our modern societies. Yet, in the twilight of these empires, a new force emerged from the east. The Persians, under Cyrus the Great, swept through Mesopotamia, heralding an era of unity and tolerance. With the fall of Babylon, the region's ancient grandeur began its final transformation. The Persians, known for their tolerance and administrative skills, brought a new era to Mesopotamia. What remains are the ruins and relics of a time when gods walked among men, and the world's first empires rose and fell, leaving behind stories of ambition, resilience, and the unrelenting quest for immortality. The rise of urban areas. The Ubaidian culture emerged in the southern region. The Ubaid occupied modest agricultural settlements that progressively evolved into towns. The farmers produced an excess of grain and vegetables. They exchanged surplus goods with people possessing resources like stone, timber, metal, and other uncommon items in farming communities. Trade along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers flourished, and by 4000 BCE, settlements evolved into cities. Eridu and Uruk were among the earliest cities of this nature. The expansion of urban areas resulted in a transformation in social structure. Groups of individuals united. They conversed in a common language and jointly claimed their right to govern certain territories. Leaders emerged inside the group, creating social structures. The rich class consisted of monarchs or aristocrats, clergy and intellectuals dedicated to education and study. The middle class primarily consisted of merchants, artists, and in some cases, military people. The lowest social strata comprised peasants and enslaved persons. Religion was essential in urban life. Every city had its unique temples and favored deities. In urban regions, the patron deity, designated as the particular protector of a town or community, may differ from neighborhood to neighborhood. Early Mesopotamians held a belief in a multitude of spirits, deities, and holy entities. Different professions, scribe, merchant, or builder, were each linked to a patron deity that ensured their welfare. Many individuals venerated multiple deities linked to the primary realms of the Mesopotamian cosmos: the sky, the earth, and the underworld. He was the originator of all gods. He inhabited and ruled the heavens. Enlil was the god of the air, whereas Utu was the god of the sun, truth, and justice. Nana was the lunar deity. Inanna governed love and strife, whereas Ninhursag was the deity of untamed wildlife. Enki was the god of water, knowledge, and magic. Individuals necessitated a site to revere their deities and make offerings. As a result, individuals constructed temples to honor the deities. As urban areas grew, the temple's size, functions, and wealth increased accordingly. The Sumerians. Around 3500 BCE, the Sumerians emerged as a distinct culture around the Euphrates River. The Sumerians resolved this difficulty by vacating the land they occupied to make it operational. They constructed canals that diverted water and divided the marshes into arable land and aquatic zones. They founded vast cities with a thriving culture, acting as the foundation of a formidable society. Many historians have linked Sumer's rise to the emergence of bronze. Circa 3100 BCE, Sumerian metallurgists discovered that the combination of copper and tin produced a highly beneficial metal, bronze. Bronze possesses more strength and durability than both copper and tin. It was the ideal metal for manufacturing tools, weapons, and sculptures. The Bronze Age began, changing the tools and weapons used by the local population. Subsequently, the utilization of bronze proliferated across Europe and Asia. The Sumerians differentiated themselves from their contemporaneous societies. They organized their civilization to fulfill the needs of their population. The construction of canals for agricultural land required a significant labor force. The efforts of these workers facilitated the generation of adequate food to support a large population. Farmers utilized oxen-drawn plows to improve efficiency, enabling the Sumerians to shift from tiny plots to large agricultural areas. The canals and irrigation guaranteed a successful harvest, unaffected by drought. When did writing first emerge? Archaeologists excavating the ancient ruins of Mesopotamia unearthed many clay tablets etched with triangular symbols. The symbols were classified as cuneiform, originating from the Latin word cunus, meaning wedge. While the inscriptions clearly communicated meaning, interpreting their significance necessitated some effort. Archaeologists solved the puzzle by comparing symbols from multiple sources. Scholars decoded cuneiform script in the 1850s. Early archaeologists asserted that writing in Mesopotamia commenced with pictographs, denoted words in a writing system, and progressed into cuneiform. In the 1970s, archaeologist Denise Schmant-Besserat, B. 1933, challenged these earlier perspectives. Schmant-Besserat, a former professor of art and Middle Eastern studies at the University of Texas, Austin, contended that writing emerged circa 3200 BCE under the Sumerian Empire. She claimed that Sumerian authorities mandated records of the crops, livestock, and oil produced by farmers to determine the correct tax liabilities. They produced the records by inscribing characters onto damp clay. The preliminary agricultural records eventually evolved into cuneiform writing, employed by the Sumerians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. Schmant-Besserat posits that the beginnings transpired circa 7500 BCE, when rudimentary agriculturists endeavored to track their goods. They created clay tokens in diverse shapes, such as cones, spheres, discs, cylinders, tetrahedrons, and ovoids. Each form was ascribed a distinct value. For instance, A cone denoted a little grain quantity, whereas a cylinder signified an animal. This was the initial visual code and the first symbolic system created for communication. The citation was obtained from the January-February 2002 issue of Odyssey. After 4,000 years, a complex accounting system of several hundred forms supplanted tokens and counters. This signified the birth of writing. The Sumerians also invented wheeled chariots and carts. These carts enabled the conveyance of significant goods to markets beyond their individual cities. The Sumerians utilized water resources and, by constructing sail-equipped vessels, could trade their goods across extended distances from their territory. The Sumerians advanced from subsistence agriculture for individual families to extensive cultivation for entire communities. The harvested crops constituted the basis for commerce with other civilizations. The Sumerians' ability to communicate was of utmost importance. The development of cuneiform script enabled humans to record production, write correspondence, share information, and enter into commercial contracts. The Sumerians ought to have employed paper for their documentation. They utilized their most abundant resource, muck. They filled a tray with damp clay, polished the surface, and engraved their documents. They engraved the information on a solidified clay tablet once the mud had dried. A significant percentage of the recordings are currently available. Sumerian city-states. Sumer was not a unified nation. The territory comprised cities and their adjacent agricultural regions operating as autonomous nations. Each city-state had its own sovereign authority and aristocratic class. Each maintained its own independent economy. The central capital, governance, and monarchy emerged circa 2800 BCE. The primary Sumerian city-states included Eridu, Nippur, Lagash, Uruk, Kish, and Ur. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers constituted the basis for all these city-states. Raised earthen dikes safeguarded the city from flooding and regulated agricultural irrigation water. The cities were surrounded by a vast agricultural expanse, considered the domain of the local deities. The temple considered each piece of land it possessed the property of the deity it sanctified. Each individual in a city-state was affiliated with a certain temple, and the phrase "people of the god of that temple" denoted the entire temple community, encompassing officials, priests, herders, fishermen, gardeners, painters, stonecutters, merchants, and even enslaved people. A priest directed groups of workmen in agricultural cultivation. In Sumer, priests were revered leaders and spiritual authorities. Occasionally, they served as scientists, scholars, and community administrators. Clerics may further function as scribes and instructors. The community valued the efforts of every member and collectively reaped the rewards of its prosperity. Agriculture was a communal effort involving the participation of all community members in the harvest. The community farmed barley and wheat for bread, beans, olives, and grapes. The community also raised cattle, sheep, and goats. The others apportioned the fisherman's catch, while the fisherman's family obtained a portion of barley, wheat, and grapes from the collective harvest. The community partitioned the temple grounds into 3 portions. The community cultivated much of the land. Nonetheless, individuals rented specific agricultural land for personal utilization. The rental fee was a proportion of the crop's value, payable during harvest. Temple priests and nobility were permitted to utilize small plots of land for personal purposes. They did not pay any land usage fees. The entitlement to land use was linked to possessing a religious office. Single-story apartments were created to house the tenants. Each residence possessed a distinct entrance while sharing internal walls with other residences. Many apartments overlooked shared courtyards or gardens. Artisans, farmers, merchants, and their families inhabited the city walls for protection. Agriculturists produced the sustenance consumed by individuals, whereas artisans created functional and luxury items. Artisans meticulously created beautifully sculpted necklaces, bracelets, and rings. Carpenters fabricated dwellings, furniture, and storage systems. Weavers produced textiles from wool and flax for apparel fabrication. Tanners produced leather goods, while blacksmiths made metal tools. The open marketplace provided vegetables, grains, textiles, leather goods, jewelry, etc. Certain individuals sold their wares from stalls or tables, while others distributed them to merchants for display. The Sumerian markets featured a variety of imported goods obtained from remote areas such as the Mediterranean coast, the mountainous regions of modern Afghanistan, and the cities next to the Persian Gulf. A sovereign ruled the city-state. The public believed that the deities had chosen this monarch to rule. Alongside their rulers, city-states had priests and an aristocracy. The majority of the nobility were related to the king. The king employed tax resources to construct an army to defend his subjects against attacks. He supervised religious events, built city fortifications and irrigation systems, and upheld order among his citizens. Individuals were limited to a few functions. The king designated priests to oversee the temples, commanders to lead the army, and administrators to govern the city. He additionally engaged scribes to record contracts, taxes, and other civic matters. Authorities rigorously examined the trade of goods. The scales used for weighing grain and other commodities showed variable accuracy among different vendors. The Mesopotamians enhanced worldwide commerce by establishing a consistent system of transaction weights. Merchants exchanged commodities with urban inhabitants and travelers, and transported surplus commodities for trade with other cities. Reed canoes equipped with intricately designed sails let traders travel between urban centers along the major rivers. The abundance of native reeds in the area supplied resources for the watercraft. Inhabitants of the marshlands in southern Iraq still employ a similar reed boat today. Land mobility depended on two further innovations in Mesopotamia: the wheel and domesticated animals. Donkeys and oxen conveyed wheeled carts laden with pottery, jewelry, and grains, the sovereigns of Sumer. To understand Sumer accurately, visualize it as a consortium of individual city-states ruled by its sovereign. At certain intervals, one monarch achieved superior power compared to the others. The primary governance of the Sumerian city-states was established by Kish. A series of rulers from Uruk attained sovereignty. Mythology and epic poetry constitute a substantial source of modern understanding of the Sumerian monarchs. The monarch's downfall resulted in the documentation of various legends. Later generations conveyed accounts of these rulers' lives, frequently embellishing various facets of their deeds. Tradition claims that some monarchs ruled for almost 1,000 years. The King's List is a primordial record enumerating the Sumerian sovereigns. The list indicates that the first monarch, Etana, ruled for 1,560 years. Lugalbanda, another monarch, ruled for 1,200 years. Etana, the ruler of Kish, was the inaugural recorded Sumerian monarch in history. He was the ruler of a solitary city-state who initially extended his empire to include further lands. The particulars of Etana necessitate enhanced specificity. He was referred to as he who stabilized all the lands. This appellation is conjectural. Historians speculate that he wielded some authority or influence over neighboring city-states. Most historians agree that Sumerian rulers exclusively administered their city-states until Sargon Fuas, the Akkadian king, rose in 2334 BCE. Meskiagashar reigned approximately 2775 BCE, succeeded Etana. Nonetheless, he was not a king of Kish. Meskiagashar founded a rival dominion in Uruk, a city-state south of Kish. This empire was identified as the first dynasty of Uruk. According to legend, Meskiagashar was the offspring of Utu, the solar deity. Enmerkar, the son of Meskiagashar, was sometimes referred to as the progeny of Utu, born circa 2750 BCE. Enmerkar was a military ruler who sought to expand his dominion. The priest-king of Uruk may have been the inaugural individual to inscribe on clay tablets. During Enmerkar's rule, Mesopotamia saw the creation of the first platform temples. The temples were prototypes for the subsequent ziggurats, characterized by their flat tops and pyramid-like form. A warrior named Lugalbanda reigned circa 2750–2700 BCE, signifying small king, succeeded him in governance. Two monumental poems depict Lugalbanda in the mountain cave and Lugalbanda with the Anzu bird. These legends narrate Lugalbanda's military victories. According to legend, Lugalbanda wed the goddess Ninsun and fathered Gilgamesh, approximately 2700 BCE, a powerful king and the central figure of an epic tale. The Sumerians considered Lugalbanda a god. Enmerkar and Lugalbanda were the central figures in various epic tales. These accounts afforded scholars insight into Sumerian history. The traditions clarified to historians how Sumerian rulers expanded their territory through warfare with neighboring states. They deliberated on political matters and military authority. They clarified that their population revered kings as divine beings and acted accordingly. Despite being real individuals, the legend surrounding the two monarchs evoked a grandeur akin to that of Robin Hood or King Arthur. Gilgamesh succeeded Lugalbanda upon his death. The Epic of Gilgamesh. This is one of the numerous grand tales of the renowned Gilgamesh. In the myth, the goddess Inanna, also known as Ishtar in some accounts, sought to win Gilgamesh's love, but he rejected her. This narrative, originating from the 7th century CE, is the most exhaustive rendition of the text. Nevertheless, he rejected her proposition. This signified that the narrative was recorded on 12 tablets and found in wisdom, since most of Inanna's consorts resided in the Akkadian city of Nineveh. The poetry encountered a tragic end. Inanna pursued retribution against a previous version of Gilgamesh. However, Enkidu met a tragic end. In the Mesopotamian mythology of the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh experiences tremendous sorrow for his companion. The narrative of Gilgamesh has been transmitted for millennia. The narratives exhibit minor variations throughout time. Nonetheless, when Gilgamesh lamented Enkidu, his buddy, they all communicate the same essential narrative. The epic recounts his deep sorrow. The narrative focuses on Gilgamesh, a man confronting existential questions. Shall I also perish? Shall I also perish? And must I succumb to death, becoming as lifeless as my beloved companion, Enkidu? The fear of mortality torments Gilgamesh, the ruler of Uruk, who symbolizes heroism for the Sumerian people, a wise figure who continually drives me onward. I long for the king, a fusion of the heavenly and the mortal. I seek the individual appointed by the gods as Gilgamesh, while Enkidu searches for immortality. I seek to understand how to surpass death. Consequently, Gilgamesh roamed, his heart filled with the yearning for immortality. During his arduous journey, Gilgamesh encountered numerous deities. They progressed eastward in their chase, accomplishing remarkable displays of strength, while Utnapishtim, with divine knowledge, withstood sorrow and hardship while preserving his immortality. He confronted floods, mortality, and malicious forces and received sagacious advice on surmounting these challenges. Source: Mitchell, Stephen. Gilgamesh: An Augmented Life, A Noble Life. English version. New York: Free Press, 2006. Gilgamesh was a mythological entity, although he probably had a historical existence. He was born in Uruk around 2700 BCE and became the fifth king of Sumer. At different intervals, Gilgamesh exhibited traits of a tyrant, a loyal ally, a boastful individual, and a hero. He commissioned the erection of walls surrounding the city of Uruk. In the tale, Gilgamesh engages in a series of feats that incite the wrath of the Sumerian gods. They inflict retribution by ending the life of his dearest companion, Enkidu. Gilgamesh endeavors, yet fails to uncover a method for attaining immortality. The Epic of Gilgamesh exhibits significant connections with the Bible. In the epic poem, a massive flood submerges the earth. This narrative closely parallels the biblical account of Noah and the flood. About 50 years after Etana's reign, another sovereign of Kish asserted control over the area. Enmebaragesi, approximately 2750 BCE, was the sovereign who conquered the state of Elam. Elam, an ancient civilization in present-day Iran, flourished from 5000 BCE to 539 BCE. With the advancement of Sumer, commerce thrived, resulting in the spread of the Sumerian language and religious concepts. Individuals also transmitted knowledge regarding agriculture, medicine, and science. Enmebaragesi resolved to construct a significant sacred structure at Nippur, which has been inhabited for centuries. The edifices included the Temple of Enlil, the god of the wind. Nippur developed into a vast religious center, attracting pilgrims and traders. Tradition claims that Enmebaragesi reigned for 900 years. Nonetheless, akin to many narratives, this one significantly distorted the truth by roughly 850 years. In 2670 BCE, Gilgamesh defeated Agga, the progeny of Enmebaragesi. Roughly a century after that, another city rose to prominence. Mesopotamia, the offspring of the king of Kish, became the subsequent ruler of Sumer. He transferred the empire's capital to Ur and founded the first dynasty. A dynasty is a familial lineage that governs several generations, with power typically passed from parent to child. Mesonapada's reign lasted nearly 80 years. Many subordinate rulers followed Mesonapada in the next centuries. Subsequently, Sumer experienced the rise of a powerful ruler. Lugal-Sagesi reigned approximately 2340–2316 BCE. Lugal-Sagesi was an architect of empires. He ruled as the monarch of Uruk, Kish, Umma, Ur, and Lagash. The succession from one monarch to another was frequently beset with challenges. At times, a monarch inherited the throne from his predecessor, as illustrated by Gilgamesh. At times, leaders of subordinate Sumerian city-states challenged the authority of the ruling king. In ancient times, power was equated to wealth. Sovereigns imposed taxes to build palaces, towns, and armed armies. When a monarch displayed extreme greed, revealed weakness, or died, a successor arose to take his place. The rise to monarchy often demanded a significant sacrifice of life. The continuous struggle for authority finally weakened Sumer. The empire needed help to concurrently manage internal power struggles in Sumer while repelling external attacks. Lugal-Sagesi enlisted Semites from Akkad to augment his armed forces. Nevertheless, these warriors vowed their loyalty to Sargon the Shonish. reigned approximately 334 to 279 BCE, the sovereign of Akkad. The rise of Sargon signified the end of Sumerian dominance, from Sargon to Hammurabi. The Sumerian monarch's rule ended in 2334 BCE with Sargon I's, the great ascension to Akkad and Sumer's throne. Sargon ruled the Akkadian Empire, ultimately expanding his rule across Mesopotamia and into areas of present-day Syria, Turkey, and western Iran. Akkad was situated to the northwest of Sumer. Agade, the capital, governed the towns of Akkad, unlike Sumer, which consisted of independent city-states. Agade was situated on the Euphrates River, positioned between Sippar and Kish. Under Sargon's rule, Akkad's dominion extended over Sumer, resulting in the acknowledgement of southern Mesopotamia as the territory of Sumer and Akkad. Epic poems, stories, and narratives recorded on clay tablets, stelae, and bas-reliefs provide the primary source of current historians' understanding of Sargon. In mythology, Sargon was the progeny of a high priestess who secretly gave birth to him and then forsook him. The mother placed her small son in a basket and set it adrift on the river. A gardener found the basket entangled in weeds and rescued the infant. The gardener raised the boy as his own son, and Sargon eventually became the cupbearer to the king of Kish. Sargon's prestigious position allowed him to interact with numerous governmental officials. According to legend, Lugal-Zaggisi of Uruk slew the king of Kish. We must determine how Lugal-Zaggisi accomplished this. Traditionally, Sargon mobilized the Kish army to defeat Lugal-Zaggisi in 2334 BCE and founded the Akkadian Empire. A prayer to the goddess Inanna. Enheduanna, the progeny of King Sargon, functioned as a high priestess of the goddess Inanna and was prominent from 2285 to 2250 BCE. History acknowledges her as the earliest recorded female poet. I conveyed the ceremonial basket. Enheduanna embraced her position as a high priestess. I praised your qualities. I have been exiled to a location. I am sincere and have dedicated my life to assisting persons suffering from leprosy. Inanna is the goddess of love and fertility. As day dawns and light wanes, Enheduanna's father's death leads to her loss of employment in my vicinity. Her sibling, the recently crowned king, was the high priestess. Shadows obscure the light, enveloping it. In the event of sandstorms, promptly substitute her with another woman. In this poem, Enheduanna beseeches Inanna too. My refined mouth comprehends just that. Recognize the gravity of her abuse. Ambiguity. I, who once basked in triumph, possess. Removed from the sanctuary. Sargon was an extraordinary military leader. Under his leadership, the Akkadians conquered Sumer and expanded their territory to neighboring regions. Sargon participated in and prevailed in 34 conflicts across Mesopotamia, extending his dominion from present-day Iran in the east to Syria in the west, the Persian Gulf in the south, and modern Turkey in the north. He appointed 50 Ensi governors to his authority. Sargon expanded trade beyond Mesopotamia. He conveyed rich blue lapis lazuli, a semi-precious gem, from the mountains of Afghanistan and cedar wood from Lebanon to the territories of Sumer and Akkad. Sargon was the first ruler of the Akkadian dynasty. Rimush, Manishtusu, Naram-Sin, and Shar-Kali-Sher succeeded him in order. Rimush, the descendant of Sargon, ruled Akkad from around 2278 BCE to 2270 BCE. He faced numerous rebellions against his rule, but effectively suppressed each one. Following Rimesh's death, his brother Manishtusu, reigned approximately 2269 to 2255 BCE, came to the throne. His nobles assassinated him, not because of his superior popularity compared to Rimesh. The Akkadians ruled Mesopotamia for 141 years, and at the height of their power, they controlled more than 65 towns. The Akkadians appeared engaged in warfare, seeking to retain their resources and expand their empire. The Akkadian Empire covered an extensive area, and its transportation network, dependent on donkey carts and riverboats, had the potential for greater activity. Inefficient transportation also limits interaction between cities. The champions of administering the remote frontier territories escalated as the empire expanded. The Akkadian civilization. The Akkadian population utilized a Semitic language for communication. Semites originated in southern Asia, including Hebrews, Arabs, and Phoenicians. They spoke similar languages, however, each was different from Sumerian. As the Akkadians rose to prominence, the residents of Mesopotamia fused Sumerian and Akkadian cultures along with their distinct forms of communication. They communicated in Akkadian and ultimately acquired the ability to inscribe it in cuneiform, the Sumerian script. Artisans honed their skills in architecture and sculpture during the Akkadian era. Elegant Akkadian palaces functioned as strong fortresses featuring wide halls, bathing chambers, kitchens, and private sleeping quarters. The Akkadians renovated or expanded temples throughout their realm. The city of Nippur housed temples devoted to Enlil and Inanna inside a vast temple complex. The defining feature of a temple complex was the ziggurat, a tiered, pyramid-like construction with a flat summit. Ziggurats originated in temple complexes throughout Mesopotamia. Sculpture was a dominant artistic medium during the Akkadian period. The primary sculptures were of individual heads, depictions of humans or deities, and bas-reliefs illustrating notable historical events. 2 sculpted skulls have been preserved from the Akkadian period. The bronze head, adorned with a wig helmet, could represent King Sargon. Despite its deterioration, the second head offers an exceptionally genuine representation of a man. Archaeologists have not yet determined the figure's identity in the sculpture. However, many speculate it may depict Sargon. Bas-relief sculptures highlighted the military accomplishments, particularly those of the Akkadian sovereigns. While many bas-relief artworks cover entire walls, most are found on stelae, ziggurats. A ziggurat was a large, flat-topped structure featuring a temple at its summit. Facades, or outer walls, were constructed from brick, fired in a specialized oven called a kiln, while the inside core was made of unbaked brick. The temple's foundation was either square or rectangular in shape. Steps ascended the sides of a ziggurat to access a little sanctuary, the most hallowed segment of a temple or church situated at the apex of the edifice. Public worship did not occur at the ziggurat, which was considered a residence of the gods. These celebrations may have been exclusively accessible to priests performing the rituals in ziggurats. A ziggurat featured sloped walls and a flat summit akin to a truncated pyramid. Individuals sometimes refer to a ziggurat as a stepped pyramid. Clerics may have ascended specific ziggurats by a ramp or stairway. The structure of a ziggurat resembles a mountain. Some scholars believe that its form represents a conduit to the divine. Many early Mesopotamian creation myths undoubtedly utilize the shape as a symbol for the mountain. Another possible interpretation is that the ziggurat was a conduit between heaven and earth. Regardless of the shape's genesis, the construction of ziggurats was meticulous, and over 30 remain intact today. The artistry of cylinder seal artisans reached its zenith under the Akkadian Empire. Akkadian seal cutters produced characteristic seals showcasing beautifully arranged figures depicted with remarkable precision. Numerous cylinder seals have carvings that are practically impeccable miniatures of human and animal figures. Agade, the capital of Akkad, has yet to be identified. Legends, contracts, tax documents, and other contemporaneous materials cite Agade, confirming its existence to historians. The Akkadian monarchs. Naram-Sin reigned approximately 2254–2218 BCE, was the grandson of Sargon and succeeded Manishtusu as sovereign. Naram-Sin was as illustrious as his grandfather and became the central figure in many Akkadian narratives. Unfortunately, Naram-Sin was not the leader that Akkad necessitated. Naram-Sin was a remarkable military commander. However, he lacked significant admiration from his populace. His self-declaration as a divinity did not captivate them. He held the title of King of the Four Quarters for the first time, encompassing the whole Fertile Crescent. According to legend, the divinity Enlil granted Sargon authority over the southern regions. The goddess Inanna subsequently founded a sacred site within the temple at Agade. She restocked the stores with food and grain to ensure the inhabitants had adequate sustenance. She established a dedicated room solely for women. The kingdom of Akkad was in a condition of peace. Naram-Sin ascended to the king and erected the walls of Agade to great heights. Naram-Sin raised the temple to erect a more magnificent one, notwithstanding Enlil's warning to refrain. God reprimanded Naram-Sin for his apathy. Numerous city-states, including Elam and Mahashi, east of Elam, declared their independence from Akkad. Subsequently, God sent the Gutians to attack Agade. The Gutians were warriors from the Zagros Mountains in the north. Enlil also caused drought in the region, leading to famine owing to limited food supplies. Following Naram-Sin's death, his son Sharkali-Shari, reigned around 2217–193 BCE, succeeded him as ruler. His name denoted King of all Kings. The year his rule ended, the Gutians seized Agade. The Sumerian city of Ur likewise revolted against Akkadian rule and attained independence. The Akkadians progressively lost influence as other civilizations arose in Mesopotamia. As the Akkadians declined in power, the Elamites, an eastern ethnic group, began the conquest of parts of Mesopotamia. The Elamites laid siege to Ur. A siege occurs when an army surrounds a town or castle, restricting its supply access and preventing the escape of its inhabitants. Circa 2004 BCE, the residents of Ur confronted starvation and, in desperation, breached the city gates. The Elamites exhibited a lack of sympathy. They slaughtered the inhabitants, looted homes and temples, and celebrated their victory by razing most of the city's public structures. They apprehended Ibi-Sin, the sovereign of Ur, the rise of the Babylonians. Numerous conflicts transpired among the city-states of Mesopotamia between 2000 BCE and 1900 BCE. Sarai. No individual city-state rose to prominence and wielded control over vast territory. During this upheaval, a new party penetrated Mesopotamia and seized power. The Amorites were a group originating from present-day Syria. Like the Akkadians, they constituted a Semitic group and utilized a Semitic language for communication. The Amorites formed a central administration to oversee their domains, which included most areas formerly ruled by Akkad and Sumer. The choice of Babylon as their capital city led to their identification as Babylonians. The Amorites believed that their king was a god. As a result, the rulers exercised considerable power over their subjects. The populace was obligated to satisfy the king's demands. All individuals were mandated to participate in the onerous taxation. The king's army mandated the conscription of all young males. The empire administered multiple city-states that lacked municipal autonomy. Every resident was answerable to the king in Babylon, and each offense committed was considered a violation of the king's authority. Several native Babylonian kings ruled Babylonia from 1894 BCE to 1595 BCE. Extensive records from Hammurabi's reign illustrate his prominent position as a notable sovereign. Hammurabi succeeded to the throne after his father's death. Sin-mum-ol reigned around 1812 to 1793 BCE. He rose to the kingdom at a comparatively young age, likely between 18 and 20. Similar to most Mesopotamian sovereigns, he initiated his rule with martial engagement. In 1787 BCE, Hammurabi conquered Uruk, a powerful city-state. Babylonia waged war against factions from the northwest and east in subsequent years as Hammurabi aimed to expand his territory. As the Babylonians gained strength, their foes consolidated to resist them. In the east, the city-states of Ashur, Eshnunna, and Elam formed an alliance in 1764 BCE and successfully resisted a Babylonian invasion, infringe upon their territory. 1 year later, in 1763 BC, Hammurabi fought against Rim-Sin, the sovereign of the city-state Larsa, reigned approximately 1822 to 1763 BC. He utilized an innovative method to defeat Larsa. He impeded the Euphrates River, ceasing the water flow in the city. The population needed water for existence and quickly surrendered to Hammurabi's army. The military subdued several cities in southern Mesopotamia, destroying their fortifications. In the subsequent years, the Babylonians waged persistent battles against other cultures. War functioned to expand territory and elevate the population under the king's rule. The expanding population enabled the king to accumulate increased tax income. The Babylonians conducted military operations to protect their land from foreign aggressors. The excavation at Tel Hariri. The archaeological site of Tel Hariri in modern Syria was formerly the prominent city-state of Mari. In archaeology, the stratified remains of ancient settlements create an artificial mound called a tell. The tell is situated near the Iraqi border, adjacent to the contemporary town of Abu Kamal on the western side of the Euphrates River. Mari's initial rulers were monarchs from the Sumerian and Akkadian civilizations. In 1761 BCE, King Hammurabi of Babylon conquered Mari. He looted the palace of King Zimri-Lim, reigned about 1776-1761 BCE, ravaged a considerable section of the city, and ordered the destruction of the surrounding defensive brick walls. Mari evolved into a mere little hamlet inside the Babylonian Empire. The city's center area, devoid of protective fortifications, remained desolate, with its streets and buildings covered in dust and filth. Hammurabi unintentionally made a considerable contribution to history. The earth that surrounded Mari protected the city for modern archaeologists. The finding of Tel Hariri was serendipitous. In 1933, a group of Bedouins, nomadic dwellers of the desert areas of North Africa and the Middle East, excavated a mound in quest of a gravestone. They instead uncovered a beheaded statue. The finding attracted immediate notice, leading the Louvre Museum in Paris, France, to send archaeologists to the site to commence excavation. French archaeologist André Parrot, 1901 to 1980, discovered a remarkably intact palace. The archaeologist diligently unearthed the remnants, uncovering throne chambers, bathing facilities, sleeping quarters, and kitchens. Following cleansing the terracotta bathtubs, the parrot signaled their readiness for utilization. The kitchen had significant porcelain jars that once held oil, wine, and grain. The contents of Zimri-Lim's library were inventories of supplies, obtained for the palace inhabitants, and a census of skilled artisans and traders in Mari. A document implored Zimri-Lim to punish some insubordinate soldiers harshly by executing one of the most flagrant offenders. Tel Hariri provided archaeologists and historians with an accurate understanding of historical events. The library of King Zimri-Lim generated about 20,000 clay documents, allowing historians to ascertain the chronology of various Mesopotamian events. Since 1933, Hariri has had nearly continuous archaeological explorations. The excavation requires a methodical approach to removing each soil layer, with less than 50% of the area exposed. Archaeologists have unearthed this regal chamber at the excavation site of Tel Hariri. Every layer of earth removed from Tel Hariri reveals a new artifact for analysis. Today inform Hariri of its classification as a United Nations World Heritage Property. The Louvre and the museums in Aleppo and Damascus house Syria's treasures. His victory in Larsa inspired Hammurabi to utilize the same strategy again. In 1755 BCE, he orchestrated the damming of the Tigris River, ultimately leading to the subjugation of the Eshnuna tribe in the east. The artwork of Hammurabi reflects his satisfaction with his achievements. He commissioned multiple bas-reliefs to commemorate those victories. He declared to his subjects that he was not only the king of Babylonia, but also the ruler of the 4 regions, which included lands neighboring Babylonia, yet did not reach beyond the Taurus and Zagros mountains to the north and east, the Persian Gulf to the south and west, and the Mediterranean Sea to the south and west. He also included all the residents of Akkad and Sumer. The king regarded himself as a formidable architect. His major accomplishments were the canals he engineered. The canal at Sippar connected the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. He established Sippar as a fortification against foes and surrounded the city with a moat, a defensive trench typically supplied with water, an atypical notion in a largely desert area. Hammurabi erected a grand palace and several temples in Babylon. Nevertheless, Hammurabi devoted only a fraction of his focus to military conquests. He assured that his troops had sufficient supplies and instructed officials to furnish inventories of manufactured commodities in their regions. To confirm the precision of the documented quantities of food in the storehouses and sheep in the fields, Hammurabi sent more officials to validate all the records. Hammurabi's principal contribution was codifying laws that all individuals were obligated to follow. The Code of Hammurabi. The Babylonian period signified the initial explicit formulation of legal statutes. The government defined the notion of a crime and its associated penalties. Government officials meticulously pursued criminals, and their punishments were public spectacles. The primary method of punishment was execution. A comprehensive list of offenses justified the death penalty, including misbehavior in a tavern or inn. The Babylonian king mainly associated with this judicial system was Hammurabi. In 1755 BCE, Hammurabi established laws that impacted subsequent legislative frameworks. A compilation of regulations, although trivial, was a crucial progression in the development of civilization. On the inaugural occasion, all participants complied with the same regulations. Before that, each administration, the era instituted its own guidelines. The governor may preferentially aid associates by issuing authorization. They might elude accountability for transgressions or exact retribution against opponents by administering harsh sanctions for minor violations. Hammurabi's Code of Laws specified transgressions and their associated penalties. He instituted this codex of regulations to guarantee that all individuals inside his dominion would have the opportunity to achieve justice. He proclaimed, Let an individual who has been aggrieved and has a legitimate grievance approach my stele, and let my words inscribed on the monument be recited, reported in Don Nardo's ancient Mesopotamia. Although most individuals were illiterate and required a scribe to interpret the laws, they may benefit from the legal system, if ordinary individuals had been. Upon perceiving injustice, individuals may petition the government and obtain treatment commensurate with that of a noble or a priest. Hammurabi's code had 282 statutes and their associated penalties. The legislation included various private realms, including familial relationships, and imposed severe penalties. Nonetheless, in the year 1755 BCE, following promulgating the law code, most individuals considered the penalties appropriate for their transgressions. If a person causes another to lose an eye, the perpetrator will also lose one eye as punishment. The consequence of murder, robbery, and kidnapping was capital punishment. Individuals who wrongfully accused others of serious crimes, such as murder, were subject to execution. Substitute. Capital offenses encompassed the possession of stolen property, burglary, arson, witchcraft, and misconduct in public office. Hammurabi instituted the Code of Laws. These constitute only a small portion of the 282 statutes that require the restitution of an enslaved person to their owner. The Code of Hammurabi. A shekel is a unit of currency. Disburse to him 2 shekels of silver. Concerning financial matters, covet signifies an intense desire to own something. In the event of a fire occurring within a man's domicile, a man arrived to aid in quelling the desire. If an individual pilfers valuables from the deities or the palace's assets, he not only assumes the position of a householder and absconds with household objects, but also incurs the death penalty for holding the stolen stuff. The fire will engulf that man. If an individual commits theft of an ox, sheep, or any other item while having an outstanding debt, and if a pig or a boat belonging to the storm god Adad ravages his field, or if the property belongs to a deity or the palace, he shall compensate with a flood that devastates the crops, or he shall repay 30-fold. If the property belongs to a commoner, and he incurs a total loss of grain from his field that year, he must replace it 10-fold. If the thief fails to provide adequate water, he will have nothing to offer that year, and must repay his creditor with grain. He shall be executed. He will fail to fulfill his contractual obligations. Submit the interest payments for the specified fiscal year. If a man liberates an individual enslaved within a palace, he is entitled to strike the cheek of the palace slave woman, a commoner's slave, or another commoner. He is required to provide compensation of 10 shekels of silver. He will enter through the main city gate deceased. Severe penalties were imposed for offenses that did not merit the death penalty. Criminals often suffered from scalding or branding with heated metal, whipping, or confiscation of their property. Certain offenders encountered exile, compelled to abandon their nation without financial means or belongings, a fate as grim as death due to their minimal prospects for survival. Others experienced the loss of an eye, tongue, or nose, or endured fractures of an arm or leg. Transgressing the law on Hammurabi's day was profoundly serious. The combination of military might and religion made Babylonia a powerful kingdom. After Hammurabi's demise, 5 other indigenous Babylonian sovereigns ruled before this inaugural epoch of Babylonian supremacy was terminated. In Mesopotamia, the political landscape was perpetually dynamic. Cultures ascended to power and then declined, occasionally rapidly and at other times gradually. As they declined, Other cultures gained strength and assumed their position. The motivations for conflict are constant. Monarchs became avaricious for authority, territory, and riches. The most straightforward method to obtain all three was subjugating a nearby city-state. The Hittites ascended to dominance approximately 1600 BCE, coinciding with the decline of the Babylonians. The Hittites were an Indo-European group from outside Mesopotamia, specifically from regions such as Australia, Iran, or the Eurasian steppes. They originated from the north, but have not yet ascertained the precise location of their cultural inception. Upon their invasion of Mesopotamia circa 1600 BC, they encountered numerous cultural elements that they appreciated and retained. They implemented numerous alterations. The Hittites. The Hittite Empire reached its zenith between around 1600 and 1200 BCE. The Hittites engaged in a growing number of conflicts to expand their territory. Gradually, they dominated Anatolia and Syria and commenced their incursion into Egypt. The Egyptians saw the Hittites as a barbaric civilization. They vehemently opposed the Hittite invasion. The Hittite king was the political leader, military commander, and highest judicial authority. He additionally represented the Hittite deity of storms. Upon the king's demise, he ascended to divinity. The Hittite economy relied on agriculture. The land was predominantly held by nobles, chiefly the king, while the general populace consisted of freemen, skilled artisans, or enslaved individuals. The nucleus of the Hittite Empire was located in contemporary Anatolia, Turkey. The region was abundant in metals, particularly silver and iron. During the imperial era, the Hittites advanced ironworking technology. The Hittites introduced the essential skill of iron smelting to Mesopotamia. Smelting iron involves extracting the metal from raw ore, a combination of metal and rock. The Hittites knew to use iron, smelt it, forge it into implements, and temper it by heating and quenching it in cold water. The Hittites produced tools and weapons more durable and resilient than the copper and bronze implements utilized in Mesopotamia during that period. Their knives maintained sharpness for an extended duration. The Hittites utilized their ironworking expertise to manufacture weaponry that enabled them to conquer rival empires. They were reluctant to share their ironworking skills, which were crucial for preserving dominance. As the empire began to decline after 1200 BCE, the secret of Hittite iron production became widely known. The Hittites positively influenced Mesopotamia by enhancing trade. The Hittite Empire engaged in trade much beyond the confines of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The empire governed the majority of contemporary Turkey, sections of Syria, and the Mediterranean coastline. Trade routes extended down to the Arabian Peninsula and eastward into contemporary Iran. The Hittites introduced novel items and concepts to Mesopotamia and disseminated Mesopotamian culture, including cuisine, traditions, and language, beyond the region. The Hittite territories acquired numerous Sumerian inventions and advancements through their trading routes. The Hittites in Mesopotamia regarded Hammurabi's code and its supplementary regulations as rather harsh. While they agreed with the designation of certain specific activities as criminal, they contested the corresponding penalties. In the old Babylonian judicial system, offenders faced the prospect of amputation or capital punishment for most offenses. Under the revised Hittite legislation, offenders were required to pay fines. Murder incurred a substantial punishment. However, few offenses warranted the death penalty. The Kassites. While the Hittites governed Anatolia and Syria, other groups ascended to dominance in Mesopotamia. The Kassites were recognized. However, their origins remain enigmatic. During the Babylonian Empire, the Kassites arrived in Mesopotamia to cultivate the land. Agriculture necessitated numerous laborers, and immigrants who relocated to the region for farming were embraced. The Kassites governed Babylonia from approximately 1570 BCE until 1170 BCE. The Kassites established a new capital in central Mesopotamia, Dur-Kurigalzu, to the west of present-day Baghdad. They possessed extensive territory between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Subsequently, a few years after the Hittites plundered Babylon in 1595 BCE, the Kassites ascended to power under King Agum II Kakrim, reigned circa 1595 to 1545 BCE. Agum II Kakrim is recognized for returning statues of the deity Marduk and his consort Zapenet to the temples of Babylon in 1570 BCE. In accordance. According to legend, the first Kassite monarch, Gandash, or perhaps 1730-1705 BCE, appropriated these significant monuments during his incursion into Babylon. Notwithstanding his invasion's defeat, he fled with the sculptures. Their return was of significant importance to the Babylonians. The temple reclaimed the statues upon their retrieval. Agum II. Kakrim allegedly urged the Kassites to assimilate the social habits of the Babylonians and accept their deities and religious practices. This era marked a significant transformation in Mesopotamia. Individuals from southeastern Europe, India, and the Far East commenced their arrival in the region. Individuals now traversed using horse-drawn chariots and carts, enhancing their travel velocity. Empires faced challenges in maintaining dominion over their territories due to the persistent ambitions of rival rulers seeking greater wealth, power, and land. The ascendance of the Assyrians. The acquisition and relinquishment of power constituted a perpetual cycle in ancient Mesopotamia. As the Hittites and Kassites waned in influence, another civilization emerged to supplant them. The newly established empire was the Assyrian Empire. At the zenith of their dominance, the Assyrians governed all of Mesopotamia, sections of Persia, Iran, contemporary Jordan and Israel, and portions of Egypt. Historians categorize the Assyrian Empire into three distinct periods. The Old Assyrian Era, 1906-1392 BCE. The Middle Assyrian Period, 1392-1014 BCE. The Neo-Assyrian Era, 911-609 BCE. Bale-Turfin reigned from 1365-1330 BCE, was the monarch who established the foundations of the Assyrian Empire. He usurped the Mitanni Empire, which governed the region between the Hittites and Kassites in northeastern Syria. Bale asserted dominion over his domain. Nonetheless, he refrained from pursuing the expansion of his empire, resulting in nearly 200 years of peaceful coexistence among the Assyrians, Kassites, and Hittites. Tukulti-Ninurta reigned circa 1244-1208 BCE, introduced a novel vision for Assyria's potential upon ascending to the Assyrian throne. He desired Assyria to dominate all of Mesopotamia. He was a skillful military commander, leading his forces across the Euphrates to assault the Hittites. Accounts of his military conquests assert that Tukulti-Ninurta captured around 28,000 Hittite prisoners throughout his wars. The monarch reconstructed a significant portion of the capital, Ashur, and established a new city named Tukulti-Ninurta across the Tigris River in present-day Iraq. The exorbitant cost of constructing the new metropolis incited rebellion among his populace. They incarcerated the king in his palace. Historical records indicate that Ashur-nadin Apli, the son of Tukulti-Ninurta and future king of Assyria, instigated the uprising, incinerating the palace completely. The pinnacle of Assyrian civilization. Tiglath-Pileser should be 1115-1077 BCE, was the preeminent leader of the Middle Assyrian period. He was a formidable military figure credited with expanding Assyrian territory in Mesopotamia. Tiglath-Pileser was a proficient administrator and an enthusiastic hunter. He had a keen interest in animals and established multiple zoos in Assyria throughout his reign as king. Following years of disregard, Tiglath-Pileser commenced the reconstruction of Assyria's agrarian economy. Cities acquired fruits, vegetables, and grains cultivated in Assyria for commerce. They preserved surplus food to guarantee nourishment for individuals during agricultural disasters. The king forged trade relations with the Phoenicians, a civilization on the Mediterranean coastline in present-day Lebanon and Syria. The Phoenicians were maritime navigators, introducing numerous goods from various cultures to the Mediterranean. These merchants transported timber, enslaved individuals, glass, and purple dye to Assyrian markets. They additionally transported silver, tin, and various other metals to Mesopotamia. Tiglath-Pileser established a formidable and proficient army as a military leader. He commanded his forces against the tribes residing in the Zagros Mountains and the Aramaeans, who inhabited the southwestern region of present-day Syria. He seized territory from the Aramaeans, extending to the Mediterranean and facilitating the king's establishment of trade links to the west. Ashurnasirpal II. Ashurnasirpal II, the inaugural potentate of the Neo-Assyrian period, ruled from around 884 to 859 BCE. He initiated the construction of a new city at Nimrud, which he designated as Kala, situated south of Nineveh along the Tigris River. He sought to flee the ancient city of Ashur, a site of numerous kings' reigns and demises, to establish a new capital. Constructing a new metropolis necessitated thousands of laborers and substantial quantities of brick, stone, marble, metal, and gemstones. The construction of the 5 miles of walls required to safeguard the new city spanned several years. Constructing a new canal was essential to provide water for the city's inhabitants and to irrigate the agricultural lands. A religious complex and a splendid new palace occupied a substantial chunk of the city. Although the city was splendid, the accumulation of resources required for its construction antagonized all the individuals subjugated by Ashurnasirpal. The Assyrian army became notorious for its extreme brutality and cruelty, even among those who experienced practically perpetual combat. This is a singular instance of Ashurnasirpal's cruelty. In 881 BC, Ashurnasirpal initiated a war against the insubordinate governor of Nishtun. The insurgents apprehended and publicly flogged the governor of Nishtun within a year. 2 years later, rebels assassinated one of Ashurnasirpal's devoted adherents. The king's forces swiftly assaulted and vanquished the insurgents who had slain Ashurnasirpal's devoted soldiers. Tablets documented Ashurnasirpal's actions against his adversaries. I incinerated numerous captured individuals. Many were taken alive. From some I severed their hands at the wrist. From others I amputated their noses, ears, and fingers. I also extinguished the eyes of several soldiers. I incinerated their young men and women. Cited in Dale M. Brown's Mesopotamia, The Mighty Kings. Shalmaneser III. Upon the death of Ashurnasirpal II, his son Shalmaneser III, reigned circa 808, 824 BCE, ascended to the throne. Shalmaneser presided over a protracted reign characterized by incessant military campaigns against the eastern mountain tribes, Babylonians, Syrians, and Egyptians. There were few national entities that Shalmaneser was reluctant to engage in combat. Indeed, he devoted 31 of his 34 years as monarch to warfare. In 853 BCE, the Syrians established a coalition with various adversaries of the Assyrians. They confronted each other on the battlefield at Karkar, present-day Syria. where the Syrian alliance incurred significant casualties. Following his father's footsteps, Shalmaneser documented tablets containing admonitions regarding his treatment of foes. "I slew 14,000 of their warriors with the sword. I inflicted devastation upon them. The plain was insufficient to accommodate their dead. The expansive countryside was used for burial. I bridged the Orontes River with their corpses." From Brown's Mesopotamia, The Mighty Kings. When Shalmaneser asserted that I killed 14,000 warriors, he was alluding to the cumulative fatalities inflicted by his troops. It is uncertain whether he exaggerated. He said the Assyrians seized hundreds of horses and chariots. During Shalmaneser's reign, the Assyrians vanquished the Syrians to the west and conquered ancient Israel. Shalmaneser amassed riches from subjugated kingdoms in his treasury. Despite the military triumphs and the affluence they generated, Shalmaneser's subjects were discontented with their sovereign. They endured excessive taxation and endless military conflicts. The king's protracted reign witnessed numerous insurrections and myriad attempts to subvert Assyrian authority. Shalmaneser constructed a palace that surpassed his father's grandeur. It was double the size of the initial palace of Nimrud, encompassing over 12 acres and featuring more than 200 rooms. Shalmaneser possessed multiple sons. In 828 BCE, Ashurbanipal, dates unknown, persuaded the nobles and chiefs of 27 Assyrian cities to overthrow his father. At this point, Shalmaneser had reached an advanced age. He sent his son, Shamshi-Adad V, reigned circa 824–811 BCE, to engage the insurgents in combat. The conflict endured for 3 years. Ultimately, in 824 BCE, Shalmaneser passed away. Shamshi-Adad had secured both victory in combat and the throne. Sargon II. A new Assyrian dynasty commenced when Sargon II, or Uruk and Eridu, 722–705 BCE, usurped authority from the preceding monarch, Shalmaneser V, 707–722 BCE. Sargon II selected his name because it means true king. He emulated the reign of Sargon Urs of Akkad, regarded as one of Mesopotamia's most illustrious monarchs. He promptly partitioned Assyria into 70 provinces, each overseen by a governor or viceroy. The governors reported to Sargon II and were tasked with maintaining peace, collecting taxes, and supplying warriors for the king's army. Sargon II sought to forge an alliance with the invading Chaldeans to garner support from his populace. The Chaldeans inhabited the northern coastline of the Persian Gulf. During this era, monarchs established ties with various cultures. These alliances or treaties fulfilled multiple functions. If an enemy assaulted any member, an ally would deploy troops, and one ally would refrain from attacking another. The Assyrians were formally engaged in conflict with the Chaldeans. Upon Sargon II's ratification of a pact with the Chaldeans, his populace recognized that the Chaldeans would cease to be their adversaries. He also declared that residents of Ashur and Haran were exempt from taxation. This action may have garnered popularity among the populace of Ashur and Haran, yet it incited ire among Assyrians residing in neighboring cities. The alliance with the Chaldeans ultimately proved to be a catastrophic decision. The Chaldeans formed an alliance with another invading entity, the Elamites. The Elamites and the Chaldeans jointly subdued Babylonia. Suddenly, Sargon found himself compelled to defend his dominion, assemble an army, and safeguard his populace. In 720 BC, Sargon II commanded his forces against the Elamite monarch Ummanigash, who reigned circa 720 BC, and the Chaldeans. Despite their defeat, Sargon II was an ambitious monarch seeking further conquests. He retained his territory and authority, declining to capitulate. He commanded his forces against the Syrians at Karkar and secured dominance over the Syrian cities of Damascus, Arpad, and Simira. Sargon II subsequently directed his attention southward and initiated a campaign to subjugate Gaza and Rafah, both located in the contemporary Gaza Strip. He engaged and triumphed over Egyptian forces in this region. Conflict persisted as Sargon II extended his dominion over an expanding realm. His territories extended southward to near Egypt, westward to the Mediterranean Sea, and eastward into the Zagros Mountains. Battles generally documented the count of soldiers killed, prisoners captured, and gold and silver acquired. In 714 BC, Sargon's forces allegedly annihilated 430 villages in a conflict with King Rusas of Urartu, a realm adjacent to the Caucasus Mountains. They plundered the temples of the Urartian civilization, seizing over 1 ton of gold and 5 tons of silver. The Urartian side suffered significant casualties, although Sargon asserted that he lost only 1 charioteer, 2 cavalrymen, and 3 royal court members. This is an overstatement. The Assyrians did incinerate villages and plunder temples. However, they probably incurred significantly more losses than they acknowledged. Warfare has consistently proven costly. Soldiers needed horses, chariots, armaments, apparel, and sustenance, and they expected remuneration. This colossal sculpture of a winged bull with a human head was at Sargon II's palace entrance in Dur-Sharrukin. It measures around 13 feet in depth, 13 feet in height, and about 3.25 feet in width. The substantial quantities of gold and silver plundered from vanquished foes would not suffice to sustain and accommodate such a vast army. Consequently, as to his predecessors, Sargon imposed taxes on his populace. Nonetheless, taxes were not only motivated by warfare. Notwithstanding the presence of magnificent palaces in Ashur and Nimrud, Sargon commanded the erection of a new palace and city named Dur-Shar-Ruin, also called the Fortress of Sargon. From the foundation, Sargon was required to build the rectangular new town in contemporary Khorsabad. This construction project necessitated the labor of thousands of laborers. In 706 BC, the royal court relocated to Dur-Sharrukin despite the unfinished structure needing to be completed. The same year, Sargon perished in combat against the Sumerians, a nomadic group from southern Russia. At the onset of his reign, Sargon intended to provide peace and prosperity to his subjects. Nonetheless, the perpetual forces of transformation in Mesopotamia rendered him a monarch akin to all preceding Assyrian monarchs. He inflicted perpetual warfare and taxation on his populace, established a metropolis in his name, and subjugated neighboring nations. During the reign of Sargon II, the Assyrians expanded their dominion to the south. Following a 3-year siege, they subdued Judea and seized Samaria in 717 BCE. The indigenous population of the area was compelled to vacate. Sennacherib reigned circa 705, circa 681 BCE, was an astute and talented monarch. However, he expended resources similar to those of his predecessor, Sargon II, and numerous prior rulers. Sennacherib resolved to transfer to Ashur, the historical capital of Assyria, coinciding with the imminent construction of the capital city of Dur-Sharrukin. In 701 BCE, Nineveh was established as the Assyrian capital during Sennacherib's reign. Each action incurred a substantial financial expense. The narrative of Sennacherib parallels that of earlier Assyrian monarchs. He engaged in conflicts and endeavored to expand the territory of his dominion. Similar to earlier monarchs, he was assassinated by his offspring. In 681 BC, Sennacherib was praying in the temple of Nergal when 2 of his sons assassinated him. Esarhaddon, Another son, reigned circa 681–669 BCE, pursued his siblings to punish their father. However, they evaded capture. Esarhaddon. Upon Esarhaddon's ascension to the throne, the Assyrian Empire encompassed a substantial portion of the Middle East. However, he desired additional territory, authority, and riches. Esarhaddon stated, "I besieged, I captured, I plundered, I destroyed, I devastated, I incinerated, I displayed the heads of the kings on the shoulders of their nobles, and with song and music I paraded," quoted in R.C. Thompson's The Prisms of Esarhaddon, and Ashurbanipal, found at Nineveh, 1927–2008. Esarhaddon's adversaries evidently held him in profound fear. In the subsequent years, Esarhaddon waged war against a growing number of neighboring states. He assaulted Egypt, Sidon, and regions of Palestine, resulting in widespread devastation. Esarhaddon utterly obliterated the city of Sidon and commanded the decapitation of the king. Subsequently, he plundered Sidon's wealth, dispatching chests brimming with gold, silver, gemstones, ivory, maple, boxwood, and garments crafted from wool and linen. Esarhaddon, in Egypt, subjugated city after city, advancing along the Nile River towards the territories of Ethiopia. He asserted, "I subdued Egypt, Upper Egypt, and Ethiopia. I engaged in combat with Tirhaka, its king, 5 times, using my javelin, and I brought all of this territory under my dominion. I governed it," cited in D.D. Luckenbill's Records of Assyria. Before ascending to the throne, Esarhaddon entered into matrimony and fathered offspring. Children were highly advantageous to a monarch. His sons would succeed to the throne, but his daughters may establish partnerships with other sovereigns to preserve peace between Assyria and foreign nations. For instance, one of Esarhaddon's daughters wed a Scythian ruler. Esarhaddon intended for his son Sin-Adding to succeed him, but the prince perished in 672 BCE. Subsequently, another son, Ashurbanipal, was designated as the new heir. Nevertheless, he was loathed by other nobles and Assyrian priests. They preferred Shamash-Shum's skin. Esarhaddon had to leverage his authority to persuade the members of his court to acquiesce. Ashurbanipal. They drafted and executed documents to affirm their allegiance to Ashurbanipal. By 670 BCE, Esarhaddon ruled an extensive empire and ensured concord among the nobles of his court. He suspected that numerous nobility were conspiring against him and responded by ordering their executions. Upon his death, the subsequent year, Ashurbanipal ascended to the throne of Assyria. Esarhaddon's other son, Shamash-Shum-Ukin, ascended to Babylonia's throne under the Assyrian Empire's dominion. Although some of the royal Assyrian court may have despised Ashurbanipal, reigned from 669 to 627 BCE, he is frequently regarded as the final formidable monarch of Assyria. Upon Ashurbanipal's ascension to the throne, Assyria's dominion extended from contemporary Turkey to Iran and westward far into Egypt. The newly appointed monarch selected Nineveh as his capital. Ashurbanipal did not eliminate the Library of Ashurbanipal. Ashurbanipal's library housed between 20,000 to 30,000 cuneiform tablets. While this was not the inaugural library, it was arguably the most significant. This library had Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian manuscripts, including the renowned epic poem Gilgamesh, the most famous epic from Mesopotamia. Although Ashurbanipal's empire has long since vanished, his splendid library endures. Archaeologists discovered it at Nineveh in 1852. This library has provided extensive material regarding ancient Mesopotamia, including a comprehensive list of the region's kings. The library was distributed throughout multiple rooms and categorized by subject, similar to contemporary public libraries. Rooms were filled with science, poetry, theology, governance, and geography. The content encompassed legends, poems, and narratives of valor, alongside governmental documents, details of military operations, and intelligence gathered and communicated by spies to their sovereigns. Numerous scribes, acting as librarians, committed themselves to augmenting Ashurbanipal's library collection. Shortly after ascending to the throne, Egypt revolted against Assyrian dominion. Ashurbanipal dispatched forces to Egypt to re-establish dominion. In 654 BCE, Ashurbanipal, 5 years later, expelled the Assyrians from Egypt. The two nations established a trade deal. This alliance was more advantageous for Assyria than its governance of Egypt had been. The distance between Egypt and the Assyrian capital hindered a ruler's ability to exert control. Furthermore, the Egyptians vigorously resisted any foreign domination. Governance of Egypt from a distance incurred substantial costs, but commerce with the region promised significant profitability. Due to Ashurbanipal's influence, his brother Skin ascended to the throne of Babylonia. Regrettably, Shamash-Shumukin deemed Babylonia inadequate and rebelled against Ashurbanipal. In 652 BCE, Shamash-Shumskin and his confederates, Aramaeans, Elamites, and Arabs, revolted. Nevertheless, Ashurbanipal's forces proved superior. Ashurbanipal besieged Babylon and the adjacent Borsippa. After 2 years, he triumphed against his brother, who subsequently took his own life. Ashurbanipal's most significant achievement occurred outside of military engagements. He was both a military leader and highly educated. He had perused numerous Sumerian and Akkadian legends and was intrigued by the culture of his empire. The king established a comprehensive and systematically arranged library to safeguard this tradition, the inaugural one in Mesopotamia. The suicide of Ashurbanipal concluded the empire in 627 BCE. As Assyria declined, the empire gradually diminished. Adversaries had grown more formidable, and incessant assaults on Assyrian cities resulted in the enslavement of its populace, the plundering of its wealth, and the devastation of its authority. A new empire, the Babylonian Empire, was emerging. The Neo-Babylonian era. The demise of the Assyrians signaled an ascendance in the influence of the Babylonians. This was a slow transition from one culture to another. Rather, it was a progressive ascendance of one culture as the other commenced to decline. Nebuchadnezzar II ascended to power in Babylon between 604–562 BCE. His name, Enbo, denotes safeguarding his crown. The user took part in the Medes and Babylonians' invasion of Assyria in 614 BCE. Their collective endeavors compelled the Assyrians to withdraw into northwestern Mesopotamia, facilitating the Neo-Babylonians' ascendance. Nebuchadnezzar II engaged in numerous military campaigns. Nevertheless, Nebuchadnezzar was equally a constructor as he was a demolisher. He restored ancient religious edifices and enhanced the canals transporting water from the Euphrates. He encircled Babylon with a dual wall spanning 10 miles to safeguard his populace. The Ishtar Gate, a magnificent structure, adorned the primary entryway to the city. The Ishtar Gate, named for the goddess Ishtar, Inanna, was one of Nebuchadnezzar's significant achievements. It was adorned with exquisite dragons, bulls, and several other creatures. Nebuchadnezzar's military campaigns included the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BCE. He seized and transported citizens to Babylon, a period in Jewish history called the Babylonian captivity. A pivotal occurrence in Jewish history was the compelled expulsion of thousands of Jews from the kingdom of Judea to Babylon during the Babylonian captivity. Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian monarch, besieged Jerusalem on 2 occasions, in 589 and 588 BCE. The second siege endured for 18 months. The king of Judea ultimately capitulated in 586 BCE, primarily due to widespread famine among his populace. They pillaged the city and utterly obliterated the palace and temple. The temple served as the principal religious institution for the ancient Jews, and its demolition constituted a significant loss. In 538 BCE, Persian monarch Cyrus II, having subjugated Babylon, let the Jews return to Judea. Circa 530 BCE, the construction of a new temple was finalized. The Old Testament, or Tanakh, notably includes Babylonian captivity. The prophets Ezekiel, Ezra, and Nehemiah are among the most reliable sources regarding the exile era. Numerous renowned psalms, including Psalm 137, are also grounded in this age. The passage references B, denoting the rivers of Babylon, where we lamented and contemplated Zion. We suspended our lyres on the poplars as our captors requested songs from us there. How can we perform a hymn to the Lord in unfamiliar territory? Cited in the Jewish Study Bible. Zion represents the Jewish homeland. Brent Dow and Trevor McNaughton of the Melodies composed and recorded the song Be in the Rivers of Babylon in 1972. Numerous artists, including Bob Marley, Sinead O'Connor, the Neville Brothers, and Sublime, have subsequently recorded this highly popular song. The Ascendance of the Persians. A new civilization was emerging east of the Zagros Mountains, the Persians residing in what is now Iran. In 550 BCE, shortly after Nebuchadnezzar's death, Cyrus II, circa 575-529 BCE, ascended to the throne in Anshan, located in western Persis. History acknowledges Cyrus as a proficient military strategist and an adept ruler who established an empire. Despite his conquests, he exhibited considerable respect for the subjugated peoples, permitting them to retain their customs and religious practices. Cyrus established branches of his Persian administration in each region under his dominion. He designated these provinces as satrapies and termed the governors as satraps. The governance of each province was entrusted to the satraps, who exercised autonomy with minimal obligations to Cyrus. Their duties included collecting and remitting taxes to the king and providing soldiers for Cyrus's military. In 539 BCE, Cyrus commanded his forces against Babylon. The Babylonian monarch Nabonidus, reigned circa 539 BCE, was disfavored by his subjects. He opted to reside in Timah, an oasis in northwest Arabia, neglecting his duties in Babylon. According to legend, the Babylonians refrained from resisting Cyrus's incursion into the city. This swift and decisive triumph culminated in the dissolution of Mesopotamian power. Ugbaru, an officer of Cyrus who succeeded as governor post-conquest, achieved Nabonidus's triumph and claimed the territory for Cyrus. He passed away a few months later, in 538 BCE. Cyrus advanced westward, subjugating the Phoenicians. In 538 BCE, he seized Jerusalem and permitted the Jews exiled in Babylon to return to their city. The era of Mesopotamia's formidable empires has concluded. The Mesopotamians ceased internal conflicts. For the first time in over 2 millennia, the region possessed a singular, robust central authority capable of governing its populace. In the 3rd century BCE, the Greeks, led by Alexander the Great, 356 to 323 BCE, invaded Babylon again. Nevertheless, Babylon had forfeited its status as the empire's capital, prompting the majority of Babylonians to depart. By 141 BCE, Babylon was deserted. The deities of Sumer. The Sumerians adhered to a polytheistic belief system. An was the deity of the sky, whereas Enlil governed air and nature. One deity presided over weather, another over agriculture, and a third over familial health and prosperity. Lahar was the god of cattle, and Ashnan was the grain deity. Certain gods, like Enki, wielded influence over multiple domains, including fertile earth, magic, and fresh water. Goddesses held significant positions. Namu, the mother goddess, was credited with creating all other deities. Inanna represented love and conflict, while Ninshubur was associated with the morning star. Many Sumerian deities exhibited distinctly human traits. Some engaged in disputes regarding their dominion over specific realms. Others displayed volatile tempers, resulting in adverse consequences for humanity when provoked. Certain gods bestowed tranquility or imparted wisdom to the populace. Additionally, the deities governed the quotidian occurrences that influenced individual lives. Individuals believed in the union of deities. The monarchs of Sumer were seen as divine or divinely affiliated. Some were wed to goddesses. For instance, Tammuz, the king of Uruk, was the consort of the goddess Inanna. The natural elements, rain, thunder, lightning, water, and earth, were each personified by distinct deities. In Hebrew, these deities are termed the Nephilim, signifying those who descended from heaven to earth. For instance, it was believed that an aquatic demon god governing from beneath the Gulf of Persia instigated floods as retribution. The Sumerians believed in an afterlife in which upon death individuals descended to a grim realm beneath the earth's surface. Most individuals were interred in crypts, typically subterranean chambers designated for the entombment of remains beneath the floors of their residences. The typical munchkin was interred with various domestic belongings. Amelia's grave was embellished with jewelry, exquisite garments, golden chalices, and many attendants. Burials in cemeteries were less prevalent than those conducted at home. Cemetery interments were costly, and officials anticipated that the deceased's family would bear significant expenses, including bread, barley, wine, and dates. The function of the temple. The Sumerians claimed that deities fashioned humanity for their servitude. Each city possessed a principal temple, often accompanied by subsidiary shrines for specific gods. Due to the multitude of deities to venerate, Sumerian temples were bustling locales. When the populace worshipped the deities reciprocated by safeguarding the cities, ensuring sustenance for the inhabitants, and fostering prosperity among the laborers. Temples possessed extensive land holdings, and the temple priests or priestesses orchestrated rituals, sacrifices, and activities that sustained the temple. A temple requires an individual to oversee its operations, regardless of gender. The temple manager was tasked with coordinating the cultivation and harvesting of crops on the premises, tending to sheep or goats, distributing provisions, and administering ancillary enterprises that facilitated the temple's functions. Initially, some temples functioned as modest shrines dedicated to specific deities. However, as urban areas expanded, so too did their temples. A grand, affluent temple signified a prosperous city. Such a temple necessitated treasure chambers, administrative offices, a brewery, pottery facilities, granaries, and an arsenal for weapon storage. The temple's upkeep required numerous personnel, some residing on the premises. The most vital positions were those of the chief priest or priestess, along with their supporting clergy. Additional roles included scribes, accountants, musicians, artists, cooks, cleaners, and attendants. Hundreds of agrarians, shepherds, and herders were tasked with managing the land and livestock owned by the temple. The temple of the goddess Bau in Lagash was managed by Queen Shagushu, circa 2350 BCE, who also served as the chief priestess. The temple's management was a significant responsibility involving over 1,000 workers. Among them were 150 enslaved women responsible for brewing beer, grinding grain, spinning and weaving wool, and kitchen duties. Additionally, the temple employed 6 women to care for pigs, 15 cooks to prepare meals for the 1,000 staff, and a brewery staffed by 46 workers. The queen had personal attendants for her children and herself, along with a hairdresser. Entertainment was provided by a singer and several musicians. Women were tasked with familial care, which included temple prayers. Amelia-class women commissioned statues depicting women in prayer to symbolize their presence at the temple. The statue was left at the temple, suggesting perpetual prayer while the woman attended to her daily activities. Inanna in the netherworld. Inanna was the preeminent goddess for the Sumerians, representing love, fertility, and war. Her progenitors were the deities An and Namu. Inanna, or Ishtar, is featured in numerous myths and stories. In one narrative, Inanna asserts her dominion over the underworld and its inhabitants. This assertion displeases her sister, Ereshkigal, the actual underworld ruler, who is exasperated by her decision to condemn Inanna to death. Inanna's demise inflicted profound tragedy upon the country, resulting in the death of all vegetation and the cessation of growth. Nevertheless, as the gods are immortal, this indicates that Inanna was confined in the underworld. Inanna was liberated from the underworld through the assistance of the deity Enki, who declared that her resurrection was contingent upon another taking her place in the underworld. She selected her spouse Tammuz, who resided in the underworld for 6 months. This myth elucidates the seasonal vegetation cycle wherein plants flourish for half the year. Inanna is liberated from the underworld but perishes upon her return. Entertainment in Sumer. The Sumerians appreciated music, with singers and musicians playing a significant role in religious festivals. Common instruments comprised drums and stringed instruments, such as lyres and harps. Artifacts of these instruments have been discovered in the ruins of Ur and other cities. Excavations of Sumerian palaces uncovered wooden lyres embellished with gold and lapis lazuli decorations. Drums, available in various sizes and forms, were prevalent in temples and palaces. A hand drum variant, akin to a tambourine, existed. The larger drums took the shape of hourglasses or bowl-like kettle drums. The Sumerians utilized multiple types of cymbals and bells with the drums. Additionally, they favored horns, pipes, and whistles, with the largest horns resembling contemporary trumpets employed to summon troops to battle. Royal courts had a diverse array of performers. Jugglers captivated audiences, while singers and dancers provided customary supper entertainment. Amelia also took pleasure in observing athletes engage in wrestling and military-style contests. The Sumerians engaged in various games. A game board discovered in the royal cemetery of Ur, circa 26th century BCE, integrates markers and squares. The markers are circular and represent each player in 2 distinct colors. This game resembles a rudimentary form of modern backgammon. Another game of chance entailed depositing stones of varying shapes and colors into a jar. Participants wagered on which stone would emerge first, entrusting their fortune to divine intervention. Girls engaged with dolls, dollhouses, and miniature furniture in their play. Boys used miniature carts, military figures, bows, arrows, spears, and weaponry for soldier play. Additionally, boys played with toy warships and chariots. Children commonly derived enjoyment from spinning tops, hoops, and balls. The game of Ishtar resembled jump rope. Literature. Literature significantly influenced the daily lives of the Sumerians. A considerable portion of the population was literate, while those unable to read would listen to narratives and fables. Predominantly, nobles, merchants, and military officers received formal education in reading. Conversely, literacy among farmers, enslaved individuals, and laborers was scarce. Individuals employed scribes to transcribe official documents and read correspondence to the illiterate. Additionally, scribes documented official events and proclamations issued by kings and other nobles. Epic poems exalted mundane monarchs to divine status, celebrating human heroism, audacity, and ingenuity. They frequently imparted morals, offered counsel, or addressed quotidian challenges. The most renowned of the Mesopotamian epic poems is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which venerates Gilgamesh, a Sumerian sovereign, for his wisdom and insight. Hymns and prayers constituted another genre of literature, as did proverbs. Proverbs are succinct expressions that offer counsel to individuals. Their brevity facilitates memorization, allowing them to serve as literature transmitted orally within families. For numerous years, historians maintained that the biblical book of Proverbs constituted the earliest compilation of sayings. Subsequently, they unearthed even more ancient iterations of these proverbs within Egyptian literature. Nonetheless, the archaeological excavation at Nippur revealed a plethora of older proverbs and sayings, prompting historians to hypothesize that the Sumerians may have originated the first proverbs and sayings globally. A notable Sumerian adage, referenced in Samuel Noah Kramer's History Begins at Sumer, addresses the challenges faced by individuals with limited financial resources. The destitute individual is better off deceased than living. If he possesses bread, he lacks salt. If he possesses salt, he lacks bread. If he possesses meat, he lacks lamb. If he possesses lamb, he lacks meat. Kramer, moreover, references another person who provides counsel about what a man should esteem. The desert canteen epitomizes a man's existence, but the shoe signifies a man's perception. The bride represents a man's future, the sun serves as a man's sanctuary. Inventions and advances of the Sumerians. Cuneiform constituted the paramount invention of the Sumerians. Individuals utilize writing as a means of communication daily. Despite the challenges and prolonged duration of acquiring written language, it established the groundwork for significant progress in commerce, governance, and social agreements. The Sumerians needed to create a numerical system and techniques for utilizing those numbers to maintain records. Government records enumerated the quantity of sheep in a flock, the population of a city, and the number of baskets of grain in a harvest. To calculate the total worth of the products, we needed to deduct taxes from the entire sum. We calculated the wealth of a city-state by multiplying the taxes by the community's population. Comestibles were distributed among the populace. The Sumerians discovered mathematics applications that were previously unprecedented. A primary application of mathematics was in the formulation of the calendar. The Sumerian solar year consisted of two separate seasons. Summer was the period of barley harvests, while winter corresponded to contemporary autumn and winter. Due to various factors, multiple calendars were necessary for routine utilization. The calendar varied from city to city, and the nomenclature of a month in Uruk differed from that in other towns. The royal necropolis at Ur was an ancient Sumerian metropolis situated in contemporary Iraq. During the 1920s, British archaeologist Charles Leonard Woolley, 1880-1960, oversaw a collaborative excavation project between the British Museum and the University of Pennsylvania in the ancient city. During his research, he discovered a royal cemetery that was the most magnificent in the ancient Near East. Burials were conducted circa 2500 BCE and remained undisturbed until Woolley and his colleagues discovered them. Woolley and his crew unearthed many antique antiquities within these graves. The graves included extensive paintings illustrating ancient Sumerian civilization, accompanied by gold and silver jewelry, cups, and various furnishings. Certain tombs can be attributed to specific persons, such as Queen Puabi, who resided between 2600 and 2500 BCE. Other tombs have been assigned broad names based on the artifacts discovered within their burials. The Great Death Pit housed the remains of over 74 servants who perished to serve their masters in the afterlife. The standard was among the most exquisite artifacts of the cemetery. This may have served as the resonating chamber for a stringed instrument. The sides are inlaid with lapis lazuli and chopped shells. Figures are arranged in 3 rows and consist of humans and animals. It appears that the individuals are making preparations for a feast. This panel depicts individuals from many backgrounds, including monarchs, attendants, warriors, agriculturists, artisans, and numerous other vocations. Lagash. A single month may possess multiple designations in the Sumerian metropolis of Babylon. The names of the majority of months were dictated by religious holidays. Brickmakers may worship one deity in a city, while barley farmers may venerate another. Each group would designate a distinct name for the month. The Sumerians necessitated a uniform calendar for accurate record-keeping. They also need a method to quantify the years they accomplished through a 60-year cycle. This approach enabled them to assign a precise date to a business agreement, ensuring comprehensive clarity. The first calendar was founded on agricultural activities such as planting, harvesting, and other economic events. The Sumerians developed a more precise calendar around 2400 BCE, consisting of 12 months with 30 days each, totaling 360 days yearly. The Sumerians implemented a brief catch-up month every 3rd year to account for the 5 surplus days a year. This catch-up month corresponds to the contemporary leap year. Agricultural villages were significant centers of great innovations attributed to Sumerian inventions. The early Sumerians recognized that the soil they cultivated was very arid. They constructed a network of canals and ditches to irrigate the crops. This facilitated increased crop production for farmers. Augmented agricultural production nourished a growing population. The inaugural cities of the globe sprang from agricultural settlements exemplified by Eridu and Uruk. Canals and irrigation resulted in 2 significant innovations: shade tree gardens and fish farms. The inaugural shade tree garden likely served as a refreshing oasis, a verdant area abundant with trees and water amidst the arid desert climate of Mesopotamia. An advantage of water coursing through canals is the facilitation of pool filling. The Sumerians were the pioneers of aquaculture in pools. Babylon served as the capital of the Babylonian Empire. The Euphrates rivers across the city's center and bifurcated into 2 halves. It served as both a religious and commercial hub. The first reference to the city's existence is found in tablets from the era of Sargon of Akkad. Under Hammurabi's rule, it was established as the capital city. Under King Nebuchadnezzar the Turk's rule, the city became an architectural marvel. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon and the Tower of Babel are significant construction endeavors of Nebuchadnezzar. The city was encircled and safeguarded by 3 tiers of walls. A 20-foot deep moat safeguarded the 3rd layer of the wall. Individuals entered through intricately adorned gates. The Ishtar Gate was the most magnificent, adorned with depictions of bulls and dragons. The processional way functioned as an official entry. In the city, individuals worshipped at temples devoted to Marduk, Ishtar, Ninurta, and other prominent Babylonian deities. Each city-state, including Babylon, has an extensive surrounding territory designated for agriculture and cattle husbandry. Herds foraged in the meadows west of the Euphrates River. The government monitored the vast herds of sheep, goats, and cattle, as most of these animals were owned by the monarch or the local temple. The animal proprietors employed individuals as herders or shepherds to supervise many flocks. A single shepherd may oversee sheep owned by the king, the temple, and a local lord. These herders and shepherds were compensated for their efforts with silver, grain, foodstuffs, oil, wine, or other commodities. The Tower of Babel. The narrative of the Tower of Babel is found in the book of Genesis in the Bible. The narrative asserts that all humanity on earth initially communicated in a singular language. The people established themselves in the region referred to in the Bible as the land of Shinar, Mesopotamia. They resolved to establish a city and commenced the construction of a monumental ziggurat within it. Genesis 10:4 states, "And they said, 'Come, let us construct a city and a tower whose pinnacle reaches the heavens, to establish a name for ourselves, otherwise we shall be dispersed across the earth,'" cited in the Jewish Study Bible. God was incensed at the people for believing they could ascend to the heavens, and for their arrogance in thinking their achievements would endure and surpass God's renown. Consequently, he caused them to speak various languages, and due to their incomprehension they were compelled to abandon the tower's construction. Verse 9 articulates, "The Lord confounded the speech of the entire earth there, resulting in their dispersion across the entire earth." Babel is a pun on the Hebrew word balal, signifying confound or confuse. Babbling denotes speaking rapidly and nonsensically, or the cacophony of numerous individuals communicating unintelligibly. The term and the designation of the city of Babylon originate from this biblical narrative. Did the Tower of Babel truly exist? Archaeologists, examining the remnants of ancient Babylon, assert its existence. The Mesopotamians constructed ziggurats to venerate their deities. During Babylon's prominence as the preeminent city in Mesopotamia, the ziggurat dedicated to the deity Marduk was the largest structure in the area. Archaeologists investigating the city's remnants have discovered what seems to be the foundation of this tower. The square base measured 300 feet per side and had a height of approximately 295 feet. King Nebuchadnezzar reconstructed the tower multiple times, elevating it to its most splendid heights. The king's inscriptions indicate that the tower was constructed of baked bricks adorned with vibrant blue enamel, and it is plausible that gardens flourished on its terraces. Society of Babylon. Similar to the Sumerians, the Babylonians possessed three social strata. The upper class, called the vulgar class, consisted of all property owners and affluent citizens. The monarch, consort, princes, princesses, and other aristocrats occupied the highest echelon. The Awilim comprised military commanders, temple priests, and priestesses. Membership in this class was determined by birth. However, ascension to the Awilim was attainable. An artisan who produced exquisite items could market them, generate substantial income, and attain affluence. A soldier exhibiting remarkable valor and achievement may be promoted to captain or general. The Awilim were anticipated to engage in military service and remit taxes on their assets. Upon a gentleman's demise, his sons bequeathed his estate and wealth. The expectation that daughters marry and integrate into their husbands' households precluded them from acquiring a share of the wealth. Preserving money within the family was paramount, as bestowing riches upon a daughter effectively transferred it to another family. We referred to the middle class as the mushkenum. The Babylonian mushkenim comprised craftsmen, artisans, merchants, farmers, and skilled laborers. The family constituted the nucleus of Babylonian existence. As the patriarch, his pronouncements were authoritative. In all matters, wives and children were anticipated to comply with their fathers and, subsequently, their husbands. While women and children possessed certain legal rights, most were subordinate to their husbands. Upon the father's demise, his eldest unmarried son assumed leadership of the family. The son possessed identical rights to the other children as his father. He may also sell his siblings into slavery and orchestrate marriages for his younger brothers and sisters. During the children's youth, the law occasionally conferred upon the mother the authority to assume the father's role. The majority of Babylonians anticipated marriage upon reaching adulthood. Procreating was significant, as offspring provided support to their aging parents. Both men and women typically marry in their mid to late adolescence. Marriage constituted a contractual arrangement between two patriarchs. The fathers organized the arrangements and drafted a contract for the sale. The bride's father established a dowry the husband was obligated to pay. The customary bride price was 1 shekel or mina, contingent upon the groom's affluence. The woman entered into matrimony with a dowry, monetary assets or presents from her family. The dowry may consist of silver, gold, or gemstones from an Awilam family, a basket of grain, or a sheep from a Mushkenim family. Minimal information exists regarding the marriage ceremony. Other than that, it was likely succinct. After exchanging vows, the husband and wife formalized their union. The vows likely included, "I will fill your lap with silver and gold. You are my wife. I am your husband," as cited in Karen Nemet-Nejat's Daily Life in Ancient Mesopotamia. Upon marriage, the woman became a member of her husband's family. If the marriage was tumultuous, divorce was expedited and uncomplicated. The husband declared, "You are not my wife." The woman retorted, "You are not my husband." The marriage concluded. The termination of the marriage necessitated the wife's repaying any dowry she had provided. A husband who expended the dowry and could not refund it rendered divorce unfeasible. This was a considerable disincentive to divorce in numerous instances. Babylonian women possessed the right to own property and manage businesses. The majority of women-owned enterprises originated from their domestic employment. A woman with remarkable bread-making abilities could sell her products at a market stall. Weaving, brewing beer, and stitching were additional prevalent occupations for women beyond the domestic sphere. Nevertheless, these constituted a fraction of the employment opportunities accessible to women. Certain women attained the status of scribes, a skill of considerable value. Awilam women were afforded the chance to assume the role of priestesses at the temple, while a varied assortment of women fulfilled positions as servants, clerks, and entertainers. Few priestesses were permitted to marry, but those allowed were prohibited from bearing children. Women might also serve as physicians, diviners, artisans, and jewelers. Nonetheless, it was more probable for a woman to be a fortune-teller than a physician, as males also practiced medicine, placing a female doctor in direct competition with her male counterparts. This did not apply to fortune-tellers, who were predominantly female. The primary function of a woman in life is to bear offspring. Typically, only 50% of children born to a household reach adulthood. During challenging periods, such as droughts, famines, or epidemics, the mortality rate among youngsters rises. A contributing factor to the mortality of certain children was their mother's inability to produce sufficient milk for nourishment. Awilam moms might employ a wet nurse, a woman designated to breastfeed a kid. Male offspring perpetuated a man's family name, leading most parents to favor sons over daughters. Several boys assured their parents of a secure future. A child is assigned a name shortly after birth. Sons bore their father's name, but also possessed additional names, including an ancestor's. For instance, a son may be designated Idin Marduk, offspring of Equisha, a progeny of Nur-Sin. Children occasionally get new names upon reaching adulthood. Childless parents frequently choose to adopt children. The adopted children possessed equivalent legal rights to those of biologically born children. Adopted females were granted dowries upon marriage, while adopted sons were entitled to inherit property from their fathers. Adoption extended beyond newborns. Numerous families embraced the adoption of children and adolescents. The adoptive parents compensated the child's relatives for the adoption rights and also financed the child's upbringing. Adults may also be eligible for adoption. If elderly parents lose all their children, potentially due to illness or conflict, they may adopt adults. This would be especially useful if the parents required assistance. Adult offspring may provide care for their aging parents. The adopted children received their new parents' estate. The Babylonian family lived together in a dwelling. The typical residence comprised multiple modest rooms, although affluent people possessed more spacious mansions. Individuals rested in beds, bathed in washrooms, and dined at tables in the primary living areas. The family dined once in the morning and once in the early evening. Affluent families possessed greater variety and meat than low-income families, as fresh meat was costly. Families with lower socioeconomic status consumed more grain products due to affordability and accessibility. The majority of individuals mill their own grain into flour. Like the Sumerians, they produced bread from barley, wheat, and various grains, consuming it during most of their meals. Regardless of wealth, the family convened at the table to dine together. Most Babylonians awoke around dawn and retired after dusk. They rested on beds constructed from wooden frames adorned with mattresses filled with wool, goat hair, or palm leaves. The mushkinim rested on mats constructed from reeds or beds stuffed with straw. The awalim possessed exquisite linen sheets and woolen blankets on their beds. Individuals prepared meals using heated embers or by baking in clay ovens. A typical family would possess clay jars and baskets for storage purposes. A will may also include wooden chests for storing garments, spices, or other items. An adequately equipped kitchen should contain cooking pots, serving dishes, and cutlery, including knives and forks. Cooks employed salt, herbs, and various spices to enhance the flavor of the food. For the majority, existence was primarily about endurance. They awakened daily, consumed sustenance, engaged in labor, and retired each night. The majority of individuals labored to obtain sustenance, habitation, and apparel. They possessed scant amenities and few entertainment alternatives. Only the affluent Abilam could procure exquisite garments, abundant sustenance, and a luxurious lifestyle. The residences of the Awalim featured distinct washrooms designated for bathing. The Babylonians were cleansed with either water or fragrant oil. They generally refrained from bathing in tubs because they required transporting water into the washrooms. The affluent possessed expansive baths of 15 feet by 15 feet in dimension. The lower walls were constructed of glazed bricks. They utilized brick for the flooring, incorporating a layer of bitumen, an oily material akin to tar, to ensure waterproofing. The Babylonians lacked modern sewer systems transporting water from bathtubs, toilets, and sinks. The Babylonians inclined the bathroom floor to eliminate extra water. The water flowed to the lower region, where a brick drain facilitated the passage of excess water through the underlying soil. Commerce in Babylonia. Each day, commodities from far regions were sent to the Babylonian marketplace. Caravans traversed the desert with spices, stone, copper, and gold. Teak, a hardwood from India, and cotton from Egypt were introduced to Babylonia. Traders from the north transported marble, iron, and precious metals. The Babylonians established market stalls to vend ceramics, leather products, jewelry, textiles, and assorted food items. Barter, a system of exchanging goods of equivalent worth, was the predominant means of transacting most commodities. A merchant exchanged a specific weight of peppercorns for a corresponding quantity of wheat or barley. The grain merchant retained a portion of the pepper and exchanged the remainder for a length of fabric, a knife, or a pile of bricks to renovate his residence. In the nascent period of Sumer, all commerce was conducted through tangible items. By the conclusion of the Babylonian era, individuals had been utilizing metal as a representation of wealth or commodities. They produced silver bars corresponding to designated weights. A silver bar valued at a shekel weighed over half an ounce, about 15 grams. Although they resembled currency, the bars were not coins. The Babylonians discovered that utilizing these metal bars was significantly more convenient than exchanging 3 goats for a cow. Utilizing this primitive currency resulted in the emergence of a new profession: moneylenders. Moneylenders extended loans to borrowers, mandating repayment within a designated period, including interest. Laborers could secure loans based on the worth of their work, while agriculturists might obtain loans against their harvests. Individuals unable to settle their debts could be compelled to labor as indentured servants to fulfill their obligations. Masses and monetary units. Currently, the store offers several products by weight, encompassing the majority of food goods. U.S. legislation requires precise labeling and precision of weights. Government inspectors verify the accuracy of scales in the meat, deli, or produce departments of supermarkets. This concept is well known. The Mesopotamians employed uniform weights in commercial transactions. If the weights are wrong, the retailer faces a substantial fine. Stone-carved weights were prevalent. However, many merchants preferred more intricate metal weights. A prevalent form for weights resembled a duck with its head nestled beneath its wing. Weights were determined according to established norms. The minimal weight was a barley corn, equivalent to 1 grain of barley. Heavier weights comprised shekels, minas, and talents or loads. 1 shekel was equivalent to 180 barley corn. 1 mina comprised 60 shekels, and 1 talent consisted of 60 minas. Ultimately, shekels and skills became interchangeable with currency. The ancient Greeks and humans utilized a unit of silver referred to as a talent. The currency of Israel is the shekel. Professions. The majority of Babylonians were engaged in agriculture. The principal crops consisted of diverse varieties of grain. The success or failure of a grain harvest impacted the entire city. Should the harvest fail for whatever reason, the populace experienced hunger. Monarchs and clergy may have consumed meat, yet all individuals ingested grain. The Babylonians constructed an irrigation trench system to irrigate their fields due to the significance of grain. The king or the local temple cultivated most of the land, while tenant farmers leased land from others and compensated their rent with a portion of the crop. The agricultural year commenced in early autumn, when the landowner and tenant finalized a contract. The rental cost for land utilization was approximately 1/3 of the annual harvest. The temples accepted the harvest as donations and oversaw food distribution to the local populace. The economy also supported numerous other professions. Proficient traders and artisans sustained their livelihoods in urban areas. A metropolis like Babylon would have carpenters, brickmakers, blacksmiths, and metal artisans. Weavers, tanners, dyers, and potters produced household items and textiles. Tanners manufactured leather for belts, footwear, bags, and animal harnesses. Each household possessed a comprehensive assortment of ceramics for storing oils, grains, spices, and dried herbs. Individuals transported water from communal wells to their residences in substantial ceramic urns. The Babylonians acknowledged the significance of proficient craftspeople. Prior to mass production, artists manually crafted each pot, pan, dish, bed, and chariot. Artisans also crafted the weaponry employed in warfare, the majority of household items, and the jewelry and garments of the Awilim. The Babylonians mastered metal casting through 3 techniques: open mold, closed mold, and lost wax. Metal workers employed these techniques to fabricate copper and bronze artifacts, including spearheads, bowls, and cups. The process of forming a mold to pour molten metal is called open mold and closed mold casting. Upon cooling and solidification of the metal, the mold is extracted, yielding a metal item conforming to the mold's shape. The lost wax process required fabricating a wax model, followed by forming a mold derived from that model. During Babylonian times, pottery and the talent of crafting products from clay were esteemed abilities. All residences, ranging from those of enslaved individuals to royal palaces, required pots, bowls, and dishes. Individuals utilized substantial jars to store grain, wine, and oil. They prepared meat, poultry, and fish in ceramic baking vessels. Certain individuals consumed wine or juice from ceramic vessels. Certain pots had elaborate embellishments, but others adhered to a minimalist aesthetic. Due to the abundance of clay in Babylonia, potters consistently had ample material for their craft. Babylonian residents conserved water in substantial unglazed ceramic vessels. Daily, they were required to transport potable water from the river. In the majority of households, enslaved individuals performed this labor. An unglazed jar provided a benefit to householders. It permitted water to gradually permeate through the pores in the clay. Upon reaching the surface of the jar, the water evaporated. Evaporation maintained the water's coolness, enhancing its palatability in the sweltering Babylonian heat. Bitumen, a viscous material that oozed from fissures in the earth's crust, coated certain storage vessels. Bitumen manifests in both liquid and solid states. Analogous to tar, we employed it to establish a waterproof seal. Construction professionals utilized the babilo to seal leaks in agricultural irrigation systems. Bitumen coated the interior of a storage jar, sealing it to avert leaking or the ingress of water vapor. Maintaining the dryness of grain was essential to avert decomposition. Additional jars contained oil. Oil was essential for illuminating rooms with little lamps. A lamp may be as diminutive as a cup. Introduce oil and a wick, producing a lamp that emits light equivalent to a candle. Brickmaking was one of the most essential professions in Babylonia. Like much of Mesopotamia, wood, stone, or metal was scarce for construction. The city depended on brickmakers to supply the necessary construction materials for residences, commercial establishments, and temples. We produced bricks by combining clay, water, and straw and pouring the material into a mold. The sun subsequently dehydrated the inferior bricks. Simanu, formerly recognized as the month of bricks, yielded sun-dried bricks for typical residences. In May or June, the conditions for brick production were optimal. The clay was moist from spring precipitation, and the sun was sufficiently intense to harden the bricks. Regrettably, sun-dried bricks were not an optimal construction material. They disintegrated upon the onset of severe rainfall. In the event of a flood, sun-dried bricks disintegrated and were carried away by the water. The finest bricks were kiln-fired and costly. The production of kiln-baked bricks required an extended duration. A kiln required an oven and fire, but sun-dried bricks could be shaped and arranged in the yard until they hardened. Temples and palaces employed kiln-fired bricks for their outside walls. No average individual could afford kiln-fired bricks for residential construction, so the brickmaker utilized sun-dried bricks for his residence. He could not rationalize using kiln-baked bricks when he could generate substantially greater profits by selling them. One can tint kiln-fired bricks to produce colored bricks or apply a glaze for a lustrous, polished appearance. Temples, palaces, and city gates were adorned with glazed blue bricks that resembled polished lapis lazuli, a highly valued blue stone in Mesopotamia. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon were one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, distinguished as 7 exceptional human-made edifices noted for their aesthetic appeal and construction challenges. Nebuchadnezzar likely constructed this elevated terraced garden as a present for his wife, Amaitis, dates unspecified. Amaitis was the offspring of a historical Iranian Mede monarch. Similar to several princesses, she wed Nebuchadnezzar to establish a diplomatic alliance between the two nations. She originated from the highlands and possibly longed for her home's verdant, temperate landscapes. The monarch endeavored to recreate the lush terrain of Amaitis's native region by building an artificial garden-clad mountain. Visitors to the site in antiquity said that the garden spanned approximately 400 square feet and reached a height of 80 feet. It is essential to understand that the hanging gardens were not built like contemporary flower baskets. They were either terraced gardens, constructed in multiple offset tiers resembling stairs, or balcony gardens featuring planters. Visitors to the gardens ascended stairs to the summit of what appeared to be a mountain where planters contained large trees, flowers, and vines. A sophisticated apparatus of buckets, pulleys, and cables elevated water from the Euphrates River. Since Babylon was situated in the center of a semi-arid region, ensuring a constant water supply was essential for maintaining the garden's vitality. The system employed a chain pump to transport water from the Euphrates to the irrigation reservoir in the garden. No remnants of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon exist, although ancient tablets provide considerable information regarding the location. Laborers crafted numerous objects from the marshland's robust, resilient reeds. Reeds were perpetually accessible in Mesopotamia like clay. The reeds were utilized to create superior carpets and baskets. They can also be utilized to fabricate lightweight watercraft. The vessels transported 1 or 2 individuals for fishing or cargo on the rivers. Sculpting was essential to the Babylonians in the arts. Sculptors fashioned miniature effigies from wood or ivory. Numerous statues were situated in temples to symbolize individuals perpetually engaged in prayer. Other sculptors utilized stone, intricately carving expansive images into walls. These sculptures are referred to as bas-reliefs. A third cohort of sculptors created the little cylinder seals extensively utilized for affixing signatures on legal papers. The 3 sculpting techniques are distinctly different. Cylinder seals need considerable attention to detail. Ivory and wooden statues were more substantial, while stone carvings executed with a hammer and chisel were even more extensive. Undoubtedly, only the Mesopotamian city-state could endure due to its scribes. Scribes recited laws and papers to individuals, documented goods and service agreements, transactions, and operated educational institutions where young boys and occasionally females acquired literacy skills. The Babylonians utilized a version of cuneiform akin to that of the Sumerians. Like the Sumerians, the Babylonians relied on numerous scribes for their writing tasks. Certain scribes were employed directly by the royal court, the military, or affluent merchants. Scribes for hire congregated around the city gates or near the temple, awaiting employment. The uneducated engaged these scribes to compose contracts and various paperwork. Questionnaires and cartographic representations. Initially, all land was owned by either the monarchy or the temples. Land ownership evolved over time. The king frequently bestowed land to reward his loyal nobles and military commanders. Consequently, such nobles may allocate land to their offspring or liquidate portions. The Babylonians exercised meticulous stewardship over land. They meticulously planned their cities, delineating outbuildings, streets, parks, temples, and other zones. Babylonia employed surveyors to measure land, delineate boundaries, and document changes in land ownership. Boundary markers in the form of stones displayed the names of the new proprietors. They employed land registrars to meticulously monitor land and building ownership. These individuals calculated tax rates and created maps to document land ownership. Pegs and ropes delineated the perimeters of the fields. The survey participants utilized triangles, rectangles, squares, and circles to delineate the land boundaries. In a metropolis, Babylonians created precise schematics of the interiors of palaces, temples, and residences. When mapping flat land or delineating building outlines, the Babylonians employed straight lines and angles to depict land. Occasionally, rivers or canals were depicted by two parallel lines with undulating lines, symbolizing water. Street maps displayed the names of the streets, mathematics of the Babylonians. Similar to the Sumerians, the Babylonians had a sophisticated numerical system. Many mathematicians contend that the Babylonian numeral system was more intricate than the contemporary decimal system. The Babylonian numerical system had 60 as its base. In contrast to the current decimal system, a sexagesimal system would exhibit considerable complexity. Nevertheless, the Babylonians needed to master merely two fundamental symbols to generate numerals up to 60. The Babylonians combined symbols at various angles to represent all numbers in their system. The Babylonians divided their day into 24 hours. Each hour consisted of 60 minutes, and each minute consisted of 60 seconds. We continue to utilize this identical approach for timekeeping today. Babylonian mathematicians created a series of tables akin to contemporary multiplication tables to assist individuals in performing computations. Two tablets discovered in Senkerah, a Babylonian city along the Euphrates River, present tables enumerating the squares of integers up to 59 and the cubes of integers up to 32. The Babylonians surpassed the Greeks in algebraic knowledge. The Babylonians employed the formula A2 plus B2 C2 to determine the length of a right triangle's hypotenuse, the longest side. This formula represents the Pythagorean theorem, named after the Greek mathematician Pythagoras, about 569 to 475 BCE. Nonetheless, the Babylonians utilized it far before Pythagoras. Despite the Babylonians' ability to resolve various mathematical problems, their comprehension of geometry was limited. For instance, they lacked terminology for geometric concepts such as angle, parallel, and perpendicular. Male school students were required to study mathematics and solve verbal problems. The practical challenges addressed concerns such as the volume of water necessary for field irrigation, If 5 square rods of farmland produce 2 bushels of barley, what is the additional acreage necessary to cultivate 150 bushels of barley? The area is 375 square rods. The Babylonians adhered to and upheld the law. This legal conduct was driven by the stringent penalties enacted for law violations. For example, fracturing an individual's leg would constitute the act of breaking that person's leg. The penalties encompassed fines, flogging, execution, or exile from Babylonia. Penalties varied from 3 to 30 times the worth of the damaged or stolen item. The predominant form of punishment for crimes was capital punishment. An individual charged with a crime must appear in a court of law. The courts were central to the Babylonian judicial system. Each court comprised 1 to 4 judges. The culprit's accusers, together with any witnesses, also appeared. Witnesses could provide evidence in person or submit it as a clay tablet. A convicted criminal who believed he had not received a just verdict could appeal to the king to annul the punishment. The foundation of Babylonian law originates from the 18th century BCE when King Hammurabi promulgated a legal system. The laws established by Hammurabi constitute the oldest known legal code in history. The rules of Hammurabi provide significant insights into Babylonian society. They elucidate the rights of men, women, and children, the laws that must be adhered to, and the consequences of any violations. Prior to Hammurabi's laws, affluent or influential individuals might fabricate regulations and compel others to adhere to them. Despite the severity of Hammurabi's laws, they were equitable. Everyone comprehended the law, and the law applied uniformly to everyone. Babylonian aesthetic. The Babylonians and Assyrians donned comparable attire, more fashionable iterations of Sumerian shawls and tunics. Statues and bas-relief carvings illustrate the attire of the Babylonians, similar to the representations by the Sumerians. Extended tunics and shawls. Each outfit is fashioned from a singular elongated piece of fabric. The tunic's length is contingent upon the individual's affluence. The majority of individuals in the Mushkenem class donned knee-length tunics. Members of the Awalum donned ankle-length tunics. Both versions had short sleeves and a rounded neckline. The majority of individuals adorned their shoulders with a shawl. Certain shawls featured fringes or tassels. Leather or metal link belts secured the shawls. Wool was abundant. Herbal dyes produced vibrant hues favored by the Babylonians. The predominant colors were hues of yellow, brown, orange, and rose. Fabric frequently showcased geometric patterns woven, embroidered with dyed threads, or printed onto the material. Hairstyles were of paramount significance for affluent Babylonians. Affluent Babylonians typically sported long, curly hair adorned with ringlets. If an individual has insufficient hair, hairdressers would include artificial hair to create an elaborate hairstyle. The Awalum frequently adorned themselves with glittering headdresses or bands of gold or silver in their hair. This resulted in excessively huge hairstyles among the affluent, regardless of gender. Black was the preferred hair color, and numerous individuals colored black hair to conform to fashion trends. Most males sported elongated, curled beards, frequently represented in statuary from that period. Jewelry was prevalent. Awalum men and women adorned themselves with pins, necklaces, bracelets, and rings. Jewelry was crafted from either gold or silver, frequently incorporating colored gemstones. A significant portion of the jewelry was intriguing, demonstrating the gold or silversmith's proficiency in craftsmanship. Certain individuals donned cylindrical felt hats that rested on their heads. Footwear remained unchanged since the Sumerian days. All individuals wore sandals. The city marketplace offered fabrics for tunics and shawls, leather for sandals and jewels. They either compensated for the products with silver or exchanged them for alternative commodities or services. Each city employed skilled weavers, dyers, leather artisans, and jewelers. Monarchs and royalty would maintain a resident hairdresser at the palace, who was available regularly. They would moreover employ sewists to fabricate clothing. Religion of the Babylonians. The Babylonians held a polytheistic belief system. Although numerous individuals were in daily life, the majority venerated merely a select few. The deities they revered assisted them in their quotidian existence. Individuals frequently invoked Babylonian deities to regulate the behaviors of demons that afflicted humanity. For instance, individuals would seek assistance from spells executed by witchcraft. Individuals anticipated that deities would alert their adherents to imminent threats such as floods or locust infestations. Natural disasters like droughts, floods, and earthquakes were perceived as divine retributions. The Sumerians and Babylonians venerated numerous of the same deities. Several of these deities possessed analogous powers, albeit under distinct appellations. Marduk, once the patron deity of Babylon, emerged as the preeminent divinity for the Babylonians. Marduk possessed 50 distinct names at different intervals. He acquired those designations by usurping other deities and appropriating their abilities and identities. Marduk has 4 eyes and ears, and emitted fire from his mouth when he spoke. Marduk was also a proficient magician. Ea was the deity responsible for the expansive oceans and fruitful land. Temple priests conveyed messages from Ea to individuals seeking wisdom or counsel. When he asserted that an event would transpire, Ea was typically accurate. Shamash, the sun god, was another prominent deity in Babylonian mythology, depicted as ascending from the eastern highlands with golden rays emanating from his shoulders. According to legend, fiery mules drew Shamash's chariot through the skies. Individuals frequently visited the temple to offer sacrifices for personal motives. They presented offerings to a particular deity to obtain that deity's favor. A young woman desiring marriage might present a sacrifice to Ishtar. She subsequently anticipated Ishtar would discover a suitor who would become her spouse. A farmer would present a gift to Ea, the deity of water and fruitful soil, in anticipation of a bountiful harvest. A soldier would seek the protection of Ninurta, the god of war, during combat. Alongside personal sacrifices, priests and priestesses would present offerings from the community. The temple served as the abode of the deities. Individuals believed the deities departed from the temples to traverse their cities and villages. They visited their pals and conferred advantageous fortune upon many. The populace organized festivals and celebrations to honor the deity's benevolence. Upon the arrival of the harvest season, the populace conducted a feast of gratitude. Each spring they had a comparable festival, shearing the sheep to collect their wool. The paramount holiday of the year for Babylonians was the New Year celebration known as Akitu. This 11-day event transpired in Nisan, the inaugural month of the Babylonian calendar. Nisan occurs between late March and early April in the contemporary calendar. During the New Year festivities, performers enacted a rendition of the Babylonian origin tale. The populace celebrated the recounting of Marduk's assistance in creating their universe. As the ceremony concluded, the king entered the temple. He would relinquish his regal scepter and enter the temple without representing his kingship. The monarch, after that, endured a severe and humiliating slap, prompting tears to accumulate in his eyes. This served to remind the king that he, too, had transgressed. The king would then receive a prophecy regarding the forthcoming year and reclaim his wand. The Babylonian astronomical system. The Babylonians identified 7 celestial entities they termed planets: the moon, Sin, the sun, Shamash, Jupiter, Marduk, Venus, Ishtar, Saturn, Nip, Mercury, Nebo, and Mars, Nergal. The Babylonian calendar assigned each planet to different months. Sin, the moon, served as the calendar master due to its reliance on lunar cycles. Sin also governed the 3rd month. Ninip governed the 4th month, while Ishtar presided over the 6th month. Every planet was correspondingly linked to a particular color. The moon was argent, while the sun was aureate. Mars seemed red, Saturn appeared black, and Jupiter appeared orange. Venus exhibited a yellow hue, whereas Mercury displayed a blue tint. Mortality in Babylonia. Babylonians perished through many means. They got illnesses, perished in combat, and had mishaps. Upon their demise, individuals were given various offerings to accompany them into the afterlife. A woman would be interred with fabric, fragrant oils, and adornments. Men would be provided with guns, tools, and other important commodities. The greater the deceased's riches, the more valuable the objects interred with them. For example, they may have interred an impoverished lady who wove solely with fabric and her crafting implements. A priest may be interred with a silver chalice, a vessel of wine, provisions, gold, gemstones, and a little effigy of the deity he worshipped. They interred all the deceased with offerings of sustenance, grain, domestic items, and wine or beer, equipping them for their extended voyage. They enveloped the awalum in exquisite fabric and positioned them in a coffin for interment. Although they may have interred their remains in coarse fabric or woven reeds, they also engaged in mummification and wrapping techniques. Interment occurred in the public cemetery or a burial site beneath the house's floor. Funerals featured specific songs, and mourners striking their chests to express their sorrow. Family and friends lamented their deceased for 7 days. The mourners wore somber attire crafted from rough fabric. They were prohibited from bathing for the full week. Numerous individuals likewise refrained from consuming food for a day or more during grief. An affluent or noble family may engage professional mourners to perform their obligations. The netherworld served as the realm for the deceased. It was an underground location inhabited by phantoms and apparitions. It was neither paradise nor inferno, but only a realm where the deceased resided following the conclusion of their earthly existence. The Babylonians believed that the gods influenced all facets of their existence and that devils were omnipresent. The desert was the most probable location to encounter demons, who frequently assembled in groups of 7. The Babylonians regarded the desert as perilous, exacerbated by the presence of devils. Individuals were prone to encounter devils at cemeteries and derelict, dilapidated structures. Astrology and the zodiac signs originate from Babylonian antiquity. The contemporary zodiac started in Babylonia but evolved through the contributions of the Hittites, Phoenicians, and Greeks. Babylonian astronomers claimed that the sun traversed the sky like a bird, flying from one location to another. They observed that the sun followed varied trajectories at different times of the year. The Babylonians categorized those pathways into 12 groupings or signs. Throughout each era, people associated the symbols with constellations observable in the nocturnal sky. Demons may manifest in various forms. They may resemble a fox or a pack of dogs. They may be serpents, chiropterans, or any organism of their preference. It was nearly unfeasible for individuals to safeguard themselves from demons. It was universally acknowledged that a demon might infiltrate through a window, evade a door, or manifest in the breeze. Encountering a demon may signify disease or misfortune. A crop failure could have been attributed to demonic influence. Demons may also account for a woman's infertility. Adverse occurrences in life may result from malevolent entities' machinations or the wrath of deities. The Babylonians had limited alternatives. They were compelled to venerate their deities or endure the repercussions. An individual enduring a series of adversities was undoubtedly disfavored by the gods. Ghosts presented a somewhat distinct issue. Female family members were tasked with commemorating deceased relatives. They provided water, bread, soup, beer, and flour for the ghost's utilization. These objects were typically interred beneath the floor of the dwelling. The woman spoke the deceased individual's name before departing with the belongings. Individuals anticipated that ghosts would be benevolent entities that assisted the household. Ensuring the ghost's contentment was advantageous, as their dissatisfaction or lack of provision could lead to evil actions against the household. Ghosts are primarily confined to the netherworld, the realm of the deceased. Several times annually, spirits may go from the afterlife to visit friends and family. An occurrence transpired in late April. These were periods of festivity for a family. They hosted their spectral friends and family with sustenance and libations. Subsequently, the apparitions returned to their abode among the deceased. The family navigated boats down the river to the realm of the deceased, the underworld, Assyrian civilization. The Assyrians, especially those who governed during the latter 4 centuries of their empire, have historically been regarded as ruthless soldiers. Nonetheless, artifacts indicate that they possessed a profound interest in literature and scholarship, as demonstrated by the library amassed by Ashurbanipal in Nineveh. Through their conquests, the Assyrians exerted a lasting influence on the culture of the Middle East. The Assyrian culture exhibited numerous characteristics of the preceding Sumerian and Akkadian cultures. In the ancient Assyrian Empire, daily existence revolved around the family unit. The spouse was the patriarch of the household. All Assyrian individuals, regardless of status from royalty to servitude, were anticipated to marry and procreate, particularly with male offspring. Daughters were deemed insignificant as they integrated into their husbands' families upon matrimony. A married daughter no longer maintained a relationship with her natal family. The societal framework. Assyria, like Sumer and Babylonia, was composed of city-states. Many individuals opted to reside in urban areas due to enhanced safety. During this period, armies from rival empires could launch invasions any time. Urban centers were fortified with towering walls to deter attackers and safeguard their inhabitants. The king's troops resided within the city walls during peacetime. Every urban resident was affiliated with a local temple. Certain cities were little and possessed merely a single temple. Other cities were significantly larger and contained multiple distinct temples. Temple life resembled familial life. The priests and priestesses served as parental figures to the temple's adherents, with their pronouncements dictating the regulations observed by the temple members. The priests coordinated responsibilities, provided sustenance for their adherents, and addressed the community's needs. Priests viewed temple members as offspring. Akin to obedient children, the populace complied with their directives. The king's political organization was analogous to a familial structure, much like a temple organization. The king resided in the palace and resembled an Assyrian patriarch. His subjects, the youngsters, complied with the king's unequivocal authority. Similarly, as a parent safeguards his family, the monarch safeguards his followers. He organized, equipped, and commanded the military that protected the populace from invaders. The king was also responsible for maintaining the temples. He designated high priests and priestesses to oversee the temples and provided enslaved labor to enhance them and construct city walls, canals, and highways. Assyrian society strictly defined social hierarchies. The king occupied the apex of the social hierarchy, succeeded by princes, other nobility, clergy, and military commanders. The middle class comprised free individuals engaged as artisans, agriculturists, pastoralists, and traders. Enslaved people were also present. Individuals could be born into slavery as descendants of enslaved persons, become enslaved owing to an inability to settle a debt, face enslavement as a consequence of criminal punishment, or be seized during warfare. Individuals in slavery possessed the right to marry, provide testimony in court, conduct business, and own property. Women were entirely reliant on their male relatives. They nurtured the children and maintained the household. An ancient Assyrian proverb asserts that a woman evolves from daughter to wife, mother, and grandmother. In other words, she was never autonomous, free to determine her life course. A woman resided with her family until her marriage. The bride consistently had a crucial part in selecting her husband. The fathers of the bride and groom convened and consented to the union. They may have inquired whether the bride favored her prospective husband, yet they did not provide her the autonomy to choose her spouse. Both fathers supplied presents for the new residents. The bride was bestowed a dowry by her father. The groom provided a bride fee for the opportunity to wed. In the marriage, the husband and wife had designated roles. The husband's responsibility was to provide for his family. They anticipated that the wife would produce several offspring, predominantly male. If the marriage proves unsuccessful, the husband may expel his bride. If he opted for this course of action, he would need to compensate her for her departure. Nevertheless, women were prohibited from departing from their husbands without consent. Archaeologists discovered hundreds of cuneiform tablets, but their contents remained unreadable and their significance unknown. A tablet could represent a pact between two conflicting empires or a catalogue of merchandise available in a marketplace. In the 1850s, four eminent scholars, Frenchman Jules Oppert, 1825 to 1905, Irishman Edward Hincks, 1792-1866, and Englishman William Henry Fox Talbot, 1800-1877, and Sir Henry Rawlinson, 1810-1895, received a copy of an inscription of Tiglath-Piles. This document reproduces cuneiform inscriptions discovered on an artifact excavated from Ashur, the contemporary city of Kalat Shirkat. The Asiatic Society requested that the quartet, a collective of individuals engaged in Mesopotamian archaeology, independently translate the inscription. Upon completion, their outcomes were practically indistinguishable. Their unanimous right responses substantiated it. They have now deciphered the enigma of the Assyrian language. Since then, historians have acquired a deeper comprehension of the Assyrian language and translated numerous ancient manuscripts. The penalty for a wife who absconded or engaged in infidelity with another man was harsh. Certain instances entailed the execution of the wife by stoning. Certain married women become enslaved due to their husband's financial hardships. It was customary to sell a wife as an enslaved person to settle her husband's debt. The queen held the highest position among women. Queens maintained houses and oversaw numerous servants. Nonetheless, their worth generally depended on their capacity to produce heirs for princes. Although they may have experienced greater comfort than the typical Assyrian woman, their fundamental role remained unchanged, bearing the next generation. In contrast to the harems that subsequently emerged in Arabian societies, the palace women resided in what was referred to as a harem. The Assyrian harem women had no matrimonial or romantic association with the king. Historians still need to be made aware of the reasons for women's residence in the palace, which is not unexpected. In the Assyrian culture of that era, men were important, although women did not. The endeavors of women required further formal documentation. Historians recognize that women were confined to a designated palace area and often engaged in idleness. This led to common problems with folks living in confined environments, with limited activities to engage them. The women of the harem engaged in gossip, quarrels, and trivial resentments. In numerous respects, they resembled the monarchs and aristocrats who, on a larger scale, quarreled and contended with their neighbors. Serving as a priestess was a significant role for a woman. Priestesses typically served in temples dedicated to goddesses. They executed identical responsibilities as priests, encompassing the management of temple operations and supervising temple estates. Priestesses engaged in religious ceremonies, reciting chants and presenting offerings to venerate the deity they served. A fabled monarch. The realm esteemed King Shams. Fee, about 823–811 BCE, for the beauty and wisdom of his consort. He commissioned the creation of a stele to commemorate his wife Semiramis, about 811–808 BCE, often referred to as Samiramat or Shamiram. Following the demise of Shamsi Fi, she governed Assyria on behalf of her son for 3 years until he attained the maturity to rule independently. Semiramis is remembered as an exceptional military commander who subdued numerous cities. Many individuals saw Semiramis as a deity, owing to her extensive veneration. In Assyrian mythology, following Semiramis's rule, she transformed into a dove and ascended into the sky. Alternative legends suggest that her son murdered her. The brief history of Assyrian cites a stele dedicated to her that states, "Stele of Samiramat, queen of Shamshi-Adad, king of Ashur, and mother of Adad-Ferrari, reigns supreme. Monarch of all, sovereign of Ashur, she is the daughter-in-law of Shalmaneser, the monarch of the 4 territories. This stele is among the rare artworks honoring a woman, H. However, she predominantly references her husband, son, and father-in-law. Nonetheless, the name Shamiram endures. Currently, numerous Assyrian girls are named after this remarkable monarch, a nation of combatants. The Assyrians' affinity for warfare characterized their identity. Assyria was among the earliest significant military forces in history. The military was formidable, belligerent, and astute. Their monarchs reveled in savage, sanguinary triumphs, instructing their warriors to exhibit no compassion. This was normal for the period. The majority of soldiers eliminated all individuals encountered in combat. Martial societies create instruments of conflict. The Assyrians employed iron spears, swords, shields, and armor as weapons. They reinforced the ends of battering rams, large beams employed to breach gates or doors, with metal to enhance durability. Their arrows have iron-tipped heads, rendering them more lethal. The Assyrians devised and implemented effective sieges, utilizing siege towers, which are mobile structures including internal ladders for scaling castle or fortress walls and battering rams. The Assyrians utilized chariots drawn by a pair of horses, each accommodating a driver and an archer. The Assyrians engaged in archery with bows and arrows and were recognized for their precision as marksmen. An adept archer might eliminate an adversary soldier from a distance beyond 270 yards. Archers transported 50 or more arrows into combat. Additional armaments employed by the infantry, soldiers engaged in ground combat, encompassed spears and swords. The Assyrian army utilized a lethal amalgamation of cavalry, infantry, archers, and precise slingshots for projectile stone launching. The Assyrians employed their martial prowess to vanquish rival civilizations and subjugate the vanquished populations. Historians possess extensive knowledge about Assyrian successes due to their utilization of sculpture to document conquests and cultural festivities. A substantial number of the exquisite Assyrian bas-relief sculptures are murals commemorating warfare. They depict monarchs embellishing their chariots with decapitated heads. They present themselves as triumphant heroes while characterizing the vanquished as subjugated. For most Assyrians, bread or porridge accompanied by onions constituted their fundamental diet. Historical records demonstrate that they sold bread by weight rather than by the loaf. However, bread may have referred to any cooked flour product. For example, it may include hot cereals derived from barley or wheat, similar to oatmeal or cream of wheat. The baked bread of Assyria resembled contemporary bread seen in the Middle East. It resembled pita, a flat, pancake-shaped bread baked in a heated brick oven. Assyrians prepared it with ground emmer wheat, barley, flax, and other grains, and consumed it daily. Protein in the Assyrian diet was derived from fish, meat, and fowl. Fish were predominantly sourced from freshwater in local rivers. The Assyrians cultivated fish in the ponds formed by dams on the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Assyrians consumed fish either fresh or desiccated. They placed small fish in the sun to desiccate, cleaned a large fish, and suspended it on a line akin to washing. Ultimately, the sun and the arid atmosphere desiccated the fish. The meats comprised beef, hog, lamb, and mutton. They were prohibitively expensive and accessible mainly to affluent Assyrians for frequent consumption. The Assyrians prepared their meat by roasting, grilling, stewing, or drying it. They also cultivated poultry and captured aquatic fowl, such as ducks. The majority of Assyrians consumed water, wine, or beer. Fruit juices were accessible but costly and necessitated greater work than consuming the fruit. The need for refrigeration for milk hindered its extensive adoption as a beverage. An elaborate Assyrian banquet may feature lentils, beans, and vegetables like pumpkins, cucumbers, and leeks. The most often consumed fruits included melons, pomegranates, apples, pears, apricots, plums, figs, and dates. Apricots, plums, figs, and dates can be dehydrated for future consumption. Pistachio nuts contribute flavor and protein to dishes. Assyrians with a penchant for sweetness prepared cakes and sweetened them with honey, date, or fig syrup. Assyrian men and women wore tunics crafted from a single piece of fabric. They encircled their bodies with lengthy fabrics and secured the material with leather belts. By 1400 BCE, the Assyrians had embellished their tunics with fringes. The fringed edges of the fabric were draped in front between the legs. Affluent individuals also adorned their garments with embroidery. Some Assyrians donned skirts akin to Scottish kilts alongside tunics. Extensive lengths of fabric encircling the body constituted the skirts. A belt secured the complete ensemble, tunic and skirt, in position. Affluent individuals occasionally affixed a jeweled pin or multiple pins to fasten the fabric. Individuals may don a wool cloak during winter to shield themselves from the cold. Sumerians and Babylonians typically donned sandals, although Assyrians generally did not. The majority of Assyrians were barefoot. On the infrequent instances that Assyrians donned footwear, they utilized sandals, constructed from a leather sole, and several leather straps to secure the shoe. While hunters and certain soldiers donned footwear, most Assyrians engaged in warfare barefoot. The Assyrian tradition dictated that women style their hair in an elevated arrangement, culminating in a bun atop their heads. Certain noble women adorned their hair with decorative bands or pins crafted from gold or silver. Men also embellished themselves with intricate hairstyles characterized by long hair in the back and arranged braids or curls on top. Noblemen displayed lengthy, thick beards that were either curled or braided. All individuals with financial means adorned themselves with jewels. The Assyrians employed elaborate pins to secure their garments. They embellished their hair with pins, bands, and ornate headdresses. Rings, bracelets, earrings, and necklaces were prevalent. The adornment of considerable jewels indicated the wearer's affluence. The greater the owner's wealth, the more intricate the jewelry. Gold, silver, and copper were prevalent metals for jewelry, with several items including gemstones such as agate, black, white, or orange, lapis lazuli, blue, carnelian, red, jasper, red, and ivory or shells, yellow or white. Designs frequently included rings or wheels, leaves, cones, spirals, and clusters of grapes. Individuals occasionally threaded cylinder seals onto chains and adorned themselves with them as jewelry. When ill, Mesopotamians had the option of two forms of medicine: magical medicine and physical medicine. Medical magicians or magical doctors were referred to as ship, and physical or practical doctors as asu. The typical Mesopotamian believed that a demon residing within the body was responsible for stomach aches, headaches, and various other enigmatic pains. The conventional solution involved calling upon a vessel for a remedy, sometimes incorporating a mystical charm or incantation to expel the demon. An ashipu may also refer a patient to an asu, a healer. An asu could mend a fractured arm, address a severe injury, or provide herbal treatment. Herbal medicines comprised concoctions for ingestion or topical application on injuries. Most pharmaceuticals consisted of plant extracts, spices, and herbs combined with sesame oil. A clay tablet contained one of the earliest prescriptions for treating infections. The prescription included turtle shells, salt, and mustard seeds. Thoroughly cleanse the wound with alcohol and hot water, then provide the prescribed treatment. Oil and packing the incision with pounded pine bark may remedy the infection. An ASU surgeon undertook a considerable risk during the surgical procedure. The surgeon's price would rise if an operation effectively cured a prominent individual. If a significant patient died, the surgeon faced the risk of amputation of his hand. Literature of the Assyrian civilization. The paramount work of Assyrian literature is the epic poem Uruk and Eridu. This work was probably transmitted through oral tradition, spoken history, such as a narrative conveyed from individual to individual. The most recognized version was likely transcribed circa 700 BCE. The poem highlights the unique traits of Assyrian culture. The Assyrians highly esteemed warfare and military valor. Ishum, the hero, is a formidable warrior, renowned for his numerous victories in battle. The deities of Assyria. Similar to other Mesopotamian societies, the Assyrian religion acknowledged numerous deities. Every domain of existence was overseen by a deity accountable for its prosperity or decline. Both large and minor deities existed. The Assyrian populace implored their selected deity for assistance in times of adversity. The individuals knelt before their deities and bowed, demonstrating humility. They also performed sacrifices to appease their selected deities. The Assyrians venerated numerous deities, with approximately 20 principal gods. All acknowledged those deities as significant. Other deities were of lesser significance and hence diminished potency. For instance, they may be deities of a specific locale or singular site. Ashur, the principal deity, held immense significance. Assyrian derives from the name Ashur, the principal deity of the Assyrians. This deity inspired the vocabulary of the capital city of the Assyrian Empire. He functioned as the Assyrian national patron and the deity of the cosmos. Ashur was regarded as the most formidable of deities. The Assyrians possessed deities associated with stars, planets, and other celestial entities. Shamash was the deity of the sun, whereas Sin was the deity of the moon. Ishtar was not only the goddess of love and war, but also the goddess of the morning and evening stars. Certain Assyrian deities, including Anu, Enlil, Ishtar, and Ea, were originally derived from the Sumerians or Babylonians. These deities were guardians of the ancient towns. Unlike many societies that sought to eradicate the religions of the peoples they subjugated, the Assyrians refrained from doing so. They revered the deities of Sumer and Babylon as significant. Recent deities also occupied positions in the Assyrian temples. They were typically benefactors of newly established cities, meteorological phenomena, or prevalent events. Adad was the Assyrian deity associated with storms. He induced precipitation, which was beneficial. He additionally summoned thunder and lightning, which might have proven more advantageous. Adad's extreme rainfall resulted in catastrophic flooding. The Assyrians perceived issues like droughts or floods as manifestations of divine displeasure. A gentle rain that benefited the crops indicated the gods' favor. The temples of the gods. Assyrian temples were expansive, multifunctional edifices with numerous chambers. Clerics performed religious ceremonies within them daily. Expansive temples had open courtyards equipped with fountains for ablution and altars designated for animal sacrifices. Each temple contained chambers inhabited by the deities. A statue represented a deity, often characterized by considerable size and a formidable presence. The deity's chambers were restricted to all individuals, including temple attendants. Access to the most sacred portions of the temple was restricted to senior priests or priestesses, and, infrequently, kings. The temples differed in size based on the deity's significance. A genuine deity possessed expansive chambers adorned with gold, silver, gemstones, and precious timber. His statue represents him as a human adorned in lavish attire. During significant events, the city displayed the statues to maintain the populace's proximity and allegiance to their deities.